Committee Room 30.
Okay, members, can remind members that all meetings are held in public session and recorded, that all electronic devices, with the exception of the new committee tablets, interfere with recording equipment in the committee rooms, even if they're in the silent mode. Can advise members whenever they come into the public gallery to switch off all mobile phones. Today's business members will receive briefings this morning on the Translink accounts 2014-15, the Translink consultation on service reductions, departmental accounts 2014-15, and the committee will also consider a number of pieces of supporting legislation. So far, with apologies for Alex Easton, Chris Little and Sean Lynch. So if there's no others, members, the committee will hold a strategic planning day during the first week of September. The committee office will be in contact with members during recess to arrange a suitable day and venue during the week commencing the 31st of August. The draft minutes of the meeting on the 1st of July 2015 can refer members to page 6 of their minute packs on the meeting on the 1st of July. Can I ask members to agree with these, that they are approved and signed? Agreed?
Yep.
Correspondence, members, refer to page 14 of your pack and the table papers. Unless there's any objections or issues to raise in any of these, we'll go for the suggested approach of to note. So companies shall be noted. So if we can ask the clerk to brief the committee on the key items of correspondence.
Thanks, Chair. Item 1 is correspondence from the Minister regarding European funding through the Connecting Europe facility. Item 7 is correspondence from the Department regarding committee queries performance against the 2014-15 business plan. Item 9 is correspondence from the Department regarding the Belfast Streets Ahead Phase 3 Public Realm Project associated traffic regulation order. Item 10 is correspondence from the Department regarding disability action issues, and then table correspondence from a Northern Ireland Water employee regarding the current budget crisis in DRD.
Okay, thank you. Just before, maybe just worth noting item number 1, and we've probably learnt at the media in terms of the correspondence from Parliament in relation to the European funding. I have to say, and put in record, the Minister did contact me late in that day to inform me as the chair of the committee. I think it's good news for DRD, given the two projects, whilst one of them in particular has come under a lot of criticism. It's good to see that public money has been, European money has been secured to facilitate within those.
In light of that, would it be appropriate to ask the Minister that now he seems to have an injection in funds, that maybe some attention could be paid to other issues that have been neglected by him?
Well, you will know that, unfortunately, the Department have said to us previously that any money they get from the European Fund means that that money is offset. So that £17 million they get from Europe means that 17 million less comes to their capital. That money goes back to the centre. But it will mean that there's an opportunity to actually bid again for that additional 17 million, for it will be available. Exactly. But you do know that that is.
I do, yeah.
That's, so it's worth putting that on record. Cahill?
Chair, the TNT fund is a very extensive fund within Europe, and I won't be churlish about it, but you know that's quite a small amount. Actually, a relatively small amount has come. It is useful. It's very welcome. I have welcomed it, but you know, there's 60 billion in that pot, like you know. So it's just to put on record.
It is, and I mean, I know I put in record in this committee before that just because the Department are disappointed that they would return the money to the centre, that shouldn't prevent them from continuing to bid. I mean, I think there's evidence here that they have bid and they've got 17 million, and we shouldn't look at the gift horse and chase it away in this case. But I think it's very welcome.
Chairperson, maybe just to give us some kind of balance, I think the Minister might well have been inspired by the committee in the first instance to go to Brussels, but he did go to Brussels, and he did the work, and we got some money. And prior to that, we were told time and time again, oh no, the Derry Belfast line doesn't qualify for European funding. The amount we got is small, but I think it's useful, and it may well be that now that at least we've got the door half open, there may be other monies, because there's an awful lot to be done in that line. And I think all of you know that beyond Antrim there's a serious problem were the clowns in the past. Just the twin track to single track, and you can't increase the frequency. And that's a major problem, is the Dargan Bridge problem for us as well, where somebody in the past would write. So I think we've got to welcome it and got to encourage more. And I keep telling myself, the southern crowd managed to get a pot full of money to upgrade a road, Cork, Dublin, on the grounds that it went on to Belfast. For years, I was told, and I'm quoting the minister saying, "Oh, well, sure, that wee part of the railway, the Brits look after that."
But John,
At least we've got something now.
we'd also have to recognise that they deserve the money in Cork to get them to Northern Ireland, to get them out of the Republic. I mean, it's probably a worthwhile investment to get them up to Northern Ireland. But thank you for bringing that attention to the committee, John.
We were just talking,
visit Derry someday.
we were just talking about Muriel Day earlier, and you're too young to remember her, but David remembers her. She sang work for Dublin, for Ireland.
But no, I think all John said, I think it should be noted, and maybe the Dáil will take back this committee's appreciation that the department did get the money. But we shouldn't be complacent that the Minister has been reasonably good with the begging bowl in other instances, but I think you should go back to Europe and look for more and continue to look for it, because the more we get out of them, then there's more in the centre for them to spend on other projects.
Chairperson, you know, yourself as chairperson, the committee played a critical role in this as well, and we want to stay with it as well, and maybe get out there again and find out what other begging bowls are about that we could get our nabs into.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we deserve it, just like every other part of European.
I'd just say that, Chairman, I know this is hopefully our last, well, maybe not our last meeting of this session, but it's really remarkable that we've kicked off with John Dallett describing the southern crowd. I really think that's a brilliant description, John. And
I have no problem with
made
that.
my day.
You know how
Opposed to the northern mob.
we're on the pump, but we better keep on track here, members. Right, are members content to note the items marked accordingly?
What's that about?
I think that's a yes. Are members content to write to Mr Bannon to regretfully decline the request for a meeting on the grounds that it is a single user issue? The clerk did bring us item number 10 in the correspondence.
Read.
I just disagree with that. I think there's an entitlement of the public.
Well, then maybe if you want, maybe the chair and the deputy chair could meet with that.
That would be useful, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if the deputy chair is content with that.
And then you could take it from there.
Yeah, we'll take it. Is members content with that approach? Okay. Are members content to forward the correspondence from NI Water employee to Department for comment? Okay. Agenda item number 5, Translink annual briefing, annual accounts. Can I refer members to page 92 of their pack? I advise members now the following officials should be joining us. Good morning. Morning, David and Philip. That should give Philip time to. Okay, can I welcome you here, and it's nice to see you back, David, and many congratulations to you and your new wife.
Thank you.
We believe you've been journeying a good degree of the world this last few weeks, and
Yes.
The committee were more than happy to put this back a week to allow you to come, to bring you back to earth after your big experience this last couple of weeks.
I'll come back to earth, don't worry.
But certainly, on my own behalf, I wish you and your wife all the best in the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So, David, the floor is yours. Do you want to make a presentation? Do you want to make a brief presentation, or do you want to go straight into?
Chair, if you don't mind, I will make a few comments. I will keep them brief, and we'll move to questions. We appreciate the opportunity to present the accounts, and also to talk about our service adjustments. And as I said, I will be very brief and make a few high-level comments. I think the accounts for the last year reflect the position that Translink finds itself in. The profit before tax, or the loss before tax, this year, I think, is the largest loss the organisation has ever incurred, at 16.6 million. And that really reflects largely the reduction in funding that we received from the department during the year for the provision of services. And the committee will be aware of the previous occasions I've been here and outlined our plan, if you like, for dealing with the service reductions, or for dealing with the reduction in income that we've received through a 3-point plan. One has been a fare increase, and there's a fare increase that took effect in February of this year. Secondly was through a restructuring of our management costs and our overheads and our administration costs, which I'll touch on in more detail in just a short second or two. And then thirdly was looking at the services we provide. And it's certainly my view that the scale of the reduction in funding that we've received, not only within this year, on which we're talking 2014-15, but also that we're receiving in 2015-16, there is no one single answer to the reduction in funding that we're receiving. And so that's why we have our 3-point plan to deal with the reduction in income and bring this organisation back to profit, we hope within a 3-year period. The 3-point plan that I've mentioned, we've discussed in the past the fare increase and the 3.1 million management overhead and administration costs. We've had a voluntary exit scheme open, which is now closed. We were seeking a total in those bands, the managerial and administration and supervisory grades, of around 65 individuals to leave the organisation. And I can tell the committee today that we will achieve the volunteers that we have sought, and we are currently in the process, those individuals are currently in the process of working their notice. And by the time I leave the organisation during September, the vast majority of those individuals will either have left the organisation or will be leaving it within a very few short weeks. And we will meet our target of 3.1 million. We may exceed it a little bit. We certainly will meet that target, and that's something that I'm pleased about. And I'm also pleased that that has been achieved entirely through volunteers. It hasn't been a compulsory scheme. The voluntary exit scheme has been entirely voluntary. You will notice from the accounts we had a loss on our fuel hedges in the past year of just short of 7 million, and that reflects the fall in oil prices. And I can talk about that in more detail in the questions if the members wish to cover that. But that reflects the movement in oil prices that we have seen, and it isn't a cash movement out of the organisation, it is an accounting adjustment. In terms of actual performance, passenger numbers have continued to grow overall, and we've seen, albeit a modest increase in the past year, but we've seen growth of 0.8%, and our passenger journeys increasing to 80 million. As I've said, the organisation has faced a challenging environment financially. You'll see from the balance sheet that our net assets are now net liabilities, and we've moved from a position at the end of the previous year of 25 million net assets to a position this year of 44 million negative net assets or net liabilities. And the largest movement there has been the movement in our pension scheme, and you will see the movement has been close to, it's just been over 65 million in the past year. I'm a chartered accountant by background. Pensions are extremely complex. There's a lot of detailed calculations go in, and it's very technical in terms of how that loss has arisen. But it's mainly been driven by a movement in the discount rate, which has moved from last year from 4.5% down to 3.3% in this past year, and that's driven the large movement we've seen in pensions in the past year. In respect of service adjustments, we have been engaged over the last number of months in the biggest consultation exercise that Translink has ever undertaken. And this has been the third part of our plan in order to bring the organisation back to profitability in the next number of years. We've received, I think, over 5,000 responses to that consultation. It has been a serious consultation, and I note there has been comments about events we've held at 7:30 in the morning and people casting dispersions on, well, that's been held at 7:30 in the morning, so we don't get any responses. That has not been the case. Whenever we sat down to deal with the financial challenges we face, I certainly didn't treat any aspect of this plan lightly. I wanted a full, frank consultation. I wanted to hear genuinely the responses of our passengers and others, and just to deal with the issue, because I know it's got a lot of media comment and attracted a lot of criticism. The event held at 7:30 was held specifically to deal with a particular service that we were proposing to adjust. And so therefore, in order to capture the people who actually use that service, we held the event at 7:30 so we can actually speak to the people who actually use it. We've held events...
Sorry, David. We're straying into our next agenda item, so maybe, if it was appropriate, we could take those two items together. So members want to look at page 163 of their pack as well, which is in relation to the consultation service reduction, which is David's really speaking to now. I should put in record that we weren't necessarily to get that today, but it was only through conversations with Translink last week. They were kind enough to brief myself and the Deputy Chair, who was unable to attend. Consideration was given then to this because this wasn't going to come until later in the year, so it's on here now. David's speaking to it, so I think draw members to attention to that, and we'll just take those two items together.
Okay, sorry if I've caused a difficulty, but the consultation we've had, as I've said, has been a serious consultation. The event held at 7:30 was designed to speak to the passengers who actually use the service, and I've made sure that during this consultation process that's exactly what we've done. We've had managers travelling on buses and on trains that we're proposing to change the service on to actually speak to the passengers, and we've received over 5,000 responses, and without a shadow of a doubt that has changed our view on the services that we are proposing to change, and we've changed our proposals as a consequence of that consultation. I think it's right that I recognise the active participation of everyone in that consultation process and thank everyone for engaging in it. And also I know that the committee were briefed in terms of the consultation by my colleague Philip and Kieran Rogan a number of weeks ago, and appreciate the opportunity to do that. Just as I finish, just a couple of more things. In respect of the service adjustments, we've worked hard to make sure that no community that currently receives a public transport service will be left without a service post these adjustments being implemented. Now, it may well mean that someone within a particular community has to, the stopping point for a service has moved by a street or a couple of streets, but we're not leaving entire communities without a service. And I think that's important to recognise that. And in fact, in some cases, communities will receive an enhanced service. And in respect of the adjustments that we're proposing, there are, albeit a small number, but there are enhancements to services in there for our passengers as well. I think finally, Chair, looking at the calendar of the Assembly and the Committee, and also my own calendar, it's likely that this is my last appearance before the Committee. I would like to say I've appreciated, I wouldn't say I've enjoyed, but I've appreciated,
You're not supposed to enjoy it.
I've appreciated every opportunity to be here. I think I've tried to be as open and transparent as I can be. While there may well have been some criticism around the shortness of my tenure at Translink, I think we've put in place a change agenda and a change programme that will continue on post my departure, and the significant strides we've made in terms of making the organisation more efficient, particularly at the managerial administration and the overhead level, will be delivered prior to my departure. And we've made progress in other things along with the committee in respect of public service contract and other issues. So I just would like to place my record on record my thanks to the committee for the scrutiny you've afforded the organisation, and we as an organisation must be open to that scrutiny, and to wish each of you the best for the future.
Okay, thank you, David. And I mean, I know I'm a fairly soft sort of person anyway, but I have to say I've appreciated your timing was around the time I approached this committee, and whilst I looked at this committee from the outside and watched the criticisms, I think your stewardship through the time since you joined the organisation, even in your briefing now, you've talked about 3.1 you may exceed in terms of the efficiencies, and I think it's important that we recognise that possibly if it had been under the previous stewardship, that never would have came to fruition. So the work you have done, even in that short time, goes without saying that the proof is now there and how you have changed, maybe how that organisation has performed. As you did say in your presentation, that many of those will go before even you leave, and some maybe in the weeks preceding that. But and that's a good thing, because many of us would have concerned that if that hadn't been done, that maybe someone else could have changed things and that decision could have been reversed. But if we can go in, David, straight into the accounts. And we did have an opportunity, our chair myself, or vice chair myself, had an opportunity to meet briefly about this, and we talked briefly over the report. But one of the things you're reporting, I mean, and it's widely known in terms of the press, about the 8.4 million loss.
Yes.
In your introductions, you talked about the fuel hedging,
yes,
and that would have been a contributing factor to that. The fuel hedging allowed for about a 6.9 million loss.
Yes.
So does that mean that without that particular issue, the loss would only have been 1.5?
No. No. So the loss before tax, as you can see on page 50 of the annual report, is 16.6 million. If the trading loss that we've quoted, 8.4, excludes the fuel hedge, because the fuel hedge is not a trading loss, it's purely an accounting adjustment, and it actually comes out below the line. So the 6.9 million loss in fuel hedge is included within the 16.6 million loss, but it's not included within the 8.4 million loss. The 8.4 is a trading loss. That doesn't include the fuel hedge, because it's not a cash loss, it's an accounting adjustment.
Okay. The other thing that's coming to light, I suppose, your debtor balance has increased from 56 million to 64 million. Do you think the reduced cash balance therefore relate to part in fact that the debtors have actually increased? I mean, we've talked about the cash reserves in the past, and obviously we know that that's diminishing now, but in terms of the debtor increase, does that play some part in terms of the cash reserve?
To be honest, Chair, I would like an opportunity to view the detail of that balance in more detail, but I don't believe...
Well, headline-wise, you're projecting £64 million debtors this year. Last year's accounts was 56, so there's an increase there.
Yes. Those balances, Chair, from my previous experience, the balances on debtors are very much timing driven.
But sorry, David, they're timing driven, but given the accounts are closed,
yes,
has that contributed to an additional amount of the money from your cash reserve to balance the books, basically?
Well, without a doubt, having greater trade debtors means that our net assets are higher than they otherwise would be.
So it would be fair to say then that your cash reserve would be higher if your debtors weren't as high? So if we're still sitting at debtors of 56 million, so we could argue that that's inflated.
Well, that is the position as at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But you're right to say that if we had collected all the trade debtors we have, our cash balance would be higher.
Without dwelling in that, and I suppose you could see why some of us would be sceptical, given that we were critical of such a large cash balance. Is there any reason then, David, that there wasn't more effort in relation to actually reducing that to even at least last year's figures or lower?
Our trade debtors and our debtor collection is always being pursued. There's been no attempt to inflate trade debtors. That's not in our interest. We want to have as much cash in our organisation as possible. We don't want to have trade debtors. We don't want people owing us money. We want to collect that. and there's been certainly no effort to massage the figures. I'm not suggesting that's the inference, but that is the inference.
No, it's definitely not the inference.
No,
But
I appreciate that.
But if I look at it, your debtor days ratio last year was 102 days. It's now increasing to 117.
Yeah.
So that ratio's, which is obviously playing into the fact that then the debt's actually increasing. Once this committee and others have been critical of the amount of cash reserves, if the ratio had been held at less than 102, certainly less than 117, the 64 million would have been much less in terms of the work that your organisation was doing to reduce that debt.
Yes, no, I appreciate that, Chair. If you do look at the point you're highlighting, our cash is down 15 million, and I think the point you're saying is if you offset the increase in trade debtors, that therefore the net impact is just south of 10 million. Yeah. And I recognise the point you're making. I've made it clear that if Translink doesn't change what it's doing, our cash reserves will run out. We will lose between this year we're reviewing and the current year we're in. Translink will lose around £30 million. They're then, and we already see the initial impact of that in our cash reserves, and even if you take the net position between trade debtors, if you take the losses that we've incurred last year and are forecast to incur this year, and in fact we will also incur losses the following year, and also then take into account the capital investments that we self-fund, because we invest in stations and in our network capital cash, which is not funded from the department. So you take all those into account. By the end of next year, Translink is left in a position where our self-funded capital investment is drying up, because we won't have the ability to fund station developments, new initiatives in the organisation.
I appreciate that, and not to dwell on this any longer, and probably hopefully the final question I'm going to ask on it, but in relation to the increase in the debtors, can you give us any indication where they're from? Are they other public bodies? Are they other government organisations? Really, who are they, David?
Chair, rather than guessing, I would appreciate the opportunity to come back to you on that, if you didn't mind.
I'm just going to press you slightly, but would many of those be government bodies?
I think there's a note, I'm trying to look for it in the accounts, that will tell us how much we are owed. I think it may be note 26. You give me just 1 second, which tells us the balance owed to the group, sorry, note 26, the balance owed to the group by the department at the year end was 20.5 million. Now that compares with 39.1 million the year before. So the amount owed by the department to Translink at the end of the year is down. It's around half what it was the previous year. So I know that's not the reason for the increase. So if you didn't mind, Chair, I would like the ability, because that will be made up of quite a number of smaller balances. I would appreciate the opportunity to analyse the balances and by all means provide the details.
The 20.5, is this DRD we're talking about?
Yes.
But if any of the 64 million, is any of that, and I really want to get something here, David, is any of that Department of Education?
Part of it may well be, yes. But the balance...
And has their balance increased? I mean, we're all conscious that everybody's in difficult times, but I mean...
Our contract arrangements would span over the financial year. So, in fairness, I think I'd rather have the detail of it. But in regards to education library boards, clearly big revenue.
Is it 75 million a year from the top of my head?
Well, their contribution, that's their total budget for provision of scholar transport, home to school transport. We would have 35 million in terms of sessional passes, and there's just short of 3 million for some other work that we do for them. But the nature of their work, obviously their contract runs until the end of June, and then resumes again in September, and there's negotiations in between about the price of sessional passes.
So can you tell us, Dave, or sorry, Philip, has that debt increased or decreased?
I don't have the bridging schedule that would tell me for sure what it would be, but we would have made some assumptions there about what we would anticipate from them, and we would in turn have provided for that. I mean, the budget would have allowed for it, but I think, to be fair, we need to...
If we could get more detail...
I don't want to characterise a very good customer as being
Well, I don't think there's many other options to go anywhere else, so don't worry, Philip, you're not going to lose them.
But they're still a very good,
particularly if you're giving them that level of credit. No private organisation could sustain it. But if we could get a bit of meat on that in relation to not only that organisation, but what other ones makes up that 64 million.
Yes.
And maybe if we could even get a comparison to last year's 56. David, you were first.
Thank you. David, I sort of personally will wish you every happiness. You're calling to do the Lord's work. I'm going to have to ask you questions today about Translink's work, not making any comparisons whatsoever.
That's fine.
In all sincerity, I do wish you and your good lady all the best. In your opening remarks, you majored on the reliability of a 3-year plan. With all due respect, this committee's seen 3-year plans from Translink over many years. Can you tell us that the solvency of the company isn't at risk?
Clearly, when you look at the balance sheet, I think you could probably use the term technically insolvent, because the group doesn't have net assets, it has net liabilities. Exactly. However, the driver of that has been a movement in the pension scheme, and the movements in that in the past, that next year is easily swing as much the other way. It's unlikely to swing much further than the way it has. But the 3-point plan that we have, the thing that concerns me most is not so much the balance sheet. The thing that would concern me most is the income statement. And if we continue to trade at a loss, Translink will not continue in existence.
But I think if you said that to the committee before, and certainly made us sit up and think on the issue of insolvency, trading at a loss. Certainly I have always believed that there was a contractual obligation on Translink not to do so, but in fact in real terms to trade at break-even point. Have you been given concessions on this by the department that will allow you for, certainly has allowed you for this year, perhaps next year and the year after, to be trading at a loss and in breach of that contractual obligation?
I must say I'm not aware of a contractual obligation to always trade at a profit. I know we have...
It wasn't always trade at a profit. It's, the wording is trade at break even, and I'm quite surprised you're not aware of it. Or trade at break even. I know the objective of our organisation, and it's loosely in agreement with the department, is that over a 3-year period we will reach a break even position. And the reduction in funding that we received this year, we received it within year and so late on in the year that it was impossible for us to take cost out of the organisation quickly enough in order to return to break even. That's what we're now seeking to do through our 3-point plan: the fare increase, the management reductions, and then the service changes. And I appreciate your scepticism about, our plan, but the first 2 parts, the fare increase and the management changes that we have made, will certainly be made. Those management changes and those cost savings will be realised by September this year. The last part of the plan, if you like, is the service adjustments, which, albeit have not been implemented yet, and we're currently in discussions with the unions and the department in respect of implementing those. But if those are implemented, it will see this organisation return to break even and return to profit. Well, let me just say, at this moment, I'm trusting your judgment. Okay. Maybe we'll meet in 3 years' time sometime. In terms of property, commercial units, and correct me if I'm wrong in my figures, are valued at over $1 million. Are you able to tell the committee what proportion of property was purchased using public money?
To be fair, to answer that question, I would need to go back through our historic records. and I'm not trying to
No,
dodge the
okay.
question. I've been in the organisation for a short period to know.
Okay. Maybe you come back.
I know we haven't purchased any commercial
No,
property.
that would be the point I would be making, that we haven't purchased any in recent years, and therefore the investment portfolio is quite dated from that point of view.
And quite a bit of it was granted at the time.
Just
Translink
also,
was set
yeah,
up.
I get that. Just also for clarification, you do give values of commercial units and buildings, or was described as property. I can't find, and maybe you could point me in the right direction, any land values in your accounts. I was of the opinion that you did have some vacant land, or land banks, as I would call them. Maybe you could come back to the committee or point me in the direction as to where they are. And also, can you say, is there any land belonging to the company outside Northern Ireland?
The only land that I'm aware, I need to just check the status of it, but we have a depot in Stranraer where we operate our cross-channel express services.
Do you lease it, or is it yours?
I believe we own that. I would just like to double check. My understanding is that we own it. We've had it on, for many years. It's just in the port there. But
You're
that
going to
would
give
be
me some
the
answers,
only.
David, where to go?
That would be the only property, I believe, outside of the region. Yeah.
If I may, just on the property, on page 52 of the accounts, you'll see the total figure for property, plant and equipment, which includes land, and then in note 13 on page 70 and 71, and also going through onto page 72, you'll see there then the breakdown of that figure, and that includes land and buildings. Now,
So what's the? I'm trying to extrapolate land, not land and buildings, just land.
okay.
There's no real figure for that. There's just land seems to me to be quite valuable.
Okay, my apologies then. The land figure specifically is not included, but it's included within that total.
I know it
That
is.
includes buildings as well.
Just on the derivatives, on this note 24, there seems to be a significant lift from last year to this year. The derivative instruments' current liabilities last year were 872. This year they're nearly 6 million. And the non-current liabilities last year, just over 1 million. This year they're over 3 million. Seems to be substantial hikes on that. Can you explain to me that?
That's linked to the fuel hedges and the fact that the oil price has moved. That means that the fuel hedges we have in place are, in the terms the market would use, not in the money. So therefore we have to reflect on our balance sheet the liability that has arisen in the organisation. So essentially that is the difference between the hedge that we bought, the price that we agreed or struck, and the current market price. So then that is captured as a liability.
I remember well, David, before your time, and not long before your time, a senior employee of yours, Kieran Rogan, demonstrating arrogance that I hadn't seen in front of a committee before. When I asked him about fuel hedging, he said it was good practice and saved the company money. Now, he said that in the current course of this committee session this year, good practice and saved the company money. Well, it hasn't, and the roulette wheel got stuck on the wrong numbers. It was gambling, as far as I'm concerned. A commercial practice I'm well aware of. But is the company still gambling with fuel hedging? And are there future losses on the horizon due to this fuel hedging practice that you're doing? In other words, is the fuel hedging practice going to continue?
Well, it has, certainly in my time when we've bought fuel relatively recently. If I may just have a moment just to... I fully accept, and I used to be the managing director of Phoenix Gas, and we hedged our gas purchases. I fully accept that in particular years there may well be significant losses or profits, and that's been the case in the past. And if
But do you accept that basically, as a company, highly subsidised by public money, you're gambling.
I don't, and with all respect, I don't agree with that. We have recently purchased fuel for the following year. Now, it's our view that at the moment that oil prices are low. We will only know that in 1 year, 2 years' time, God willing. But it's our view, it's the view of the marketplace, that prices are currently low.
But if you've played the market and got it so wrong, how good are you going to be next time? I mean, in other words, if you've got an insight, maybe you could tell some of us how to play the market and get it right this time. Because the history of it is,
but we're not,
you've cost a lot of money.
But we're not in the market to try and play the market or beat the market, because that's in my view a mug's game. What we are in the market is to deliver a fair degree of certainty. If we didn't hedge our fuel prices, we would be back at this committee every few months seeking either a fair increase or fair reduction.
I'm not too sure you can say that specifically, but I take your point.
Well, we'd be subject to much greater volatility, and I would contend that I'm not seeking views from the committee, but I'm posing a hypothetical question. Would anyone in the committee tell us today that we shouldn't lock in fuel prices either next year or the year after?
Well, I can only, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because I know you've dealt with it in the Chairman's question as well. All I can say is perhaps you might do an exercise similar to some of my researchers, and it isn't scientific by any means. If you hadn't played the market, right, but had gone with the market, are you telling me you would still have lost £7 million?
No, the losses would have been less. However, if you look, but okay, that's okay in 1 year, but if you look at it over a 5-year period, if you look at the last 5 years, it has been to our benefit to the tune of £1 million. So, I fully accept the point that in any 1 year you may well be caught out, as it appears we have this year.
Well, let's hope in your 3-year plan somebody's not coming back next year and the year after telling us that there's still those losses. So if we could just move on and just...
Well, I think the point here, David, as we do need to remember, is we do need stability for the customer as well, because I mean the last thing we want to do is Translink come in here and tell us that fuel's up 4 pence a litre and we're going to have to do a fare increase. To turn around a few months later and say we're actually doing well now, we actually reduce this. I mean, I think that will not bring any confidence to anybody who's using public transport either. I agree with the point you're making, but I think the full picture there is that their net gain was £1 million over the 5-year period. So I don't think the criticism would be entirely fair. Well,
the net gain could have been, but I don't want to dwell on this. It's an argument and it's a point. There are many successful companies that I'm aware of who don't gamble in the way this company has gambled over fuel, and have been very profitable. In terms of, and just, I know some other questions and members, but just one final thing, and maybe come back later on. Have you put any applications to the financial transaction capital for assistance and funding the very exciting Belfast Transport Hub?
In a short word, because I like to be brief in answers, is no. However, the project is not at the stage yet to enable us to put in an application. But the Belfast Transport Hub, you're right, is one of the most exciting things, not only for Belfast but for Northern Ireland. And financial transactions capital is in the mix in terms of the things we're looking at in order to actually fund it. So it's very much on our radar, very much on our agenda. The project has not yet reached the stage to enable us to apply for that, but it is on our agenda to look at, not only in relation to the hub but also other projects, to see can we use it to fund them.
That's great news. Our finance minister said that this FTC was a perfect scheme for the hub, and I hope we will follow it through. There is money there to everybody's advantage. At what stage, I'm always interested in slots, at what stage of the project do you think you would be making your application?
I think we're currently working on the designs of the hub, which will then, once we have a number of designs around looking at layouts of the hub and what actually will be on the site. Once we have worked through those and we have a preferred option, then that enables us to say how much it's going to cost and therefore then apply for FTC. So to come to a very specific answer, I expect by the end of this financial year, the early part of next year, I expect us to have a reasonably clear view of what the layout of the hub is, what's going to be on the site, how much it's going to cost, and therefore then how are we going to fund it.
Yeah. Sorry, you finished? Yeah.
I would do me in the meantime, if I may have time to come back
Yeah,
on a few other items.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. You were next.
Thanks. David, like everyone else, I wish you every happiness in the future. I want to acknowledge personally the contribution you made to this organisation. From the day and hour you came here, you could see the wind of change, and I think we all keep our fingers crossed that what you have started will continue. I believe it will. The Controller and Auditor General has audited the accounts. Sorry, has qualified the accounts. That's not an ambition that any company would want. Why did he qualify the accounts?
Sorry, that's the next one, John.
Sorry, back. You keep me right.
You're okay? You can breathe again, David?
Thankfully.
I was looking frantically to Philip.
Would have been news to me.
That's DRD.
Our accounts are unqualified, thankfully.
Oh, okay. Sorry, apologies for that. 37% of your capital expenditure is categorised as other. Why?
It's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Now, we know you're a qualified accountant. Any organisation would put 37% of their capital expenditure as other would not really be very happy about it. Why is it not detailed?
Well, there's detail on page 70 in respect of the capital expenditure and the additions that we've made during the year, and it allocates it down between land and buildings, permanent way signalling and bridges, which is essentially the railway, and vehicle, plant and equipment. I must confess, I'm not familiar with your 37% classified as other, and I would appreciate if you could point me to where that is in the accounts. I'd be happy to look, but certainly on page 70, which is where the capital expenditure is listed, and the additions to our fixed assets, it's analysed out, and there's nothing analysed.
We'll write to you on that one. I mean, it's research that has been done on behalf of the committee.
Yes, no, that's fine.
So, if you're happy enough,
Yeah, that's
the
fine.
members would all be familiar with the question that John's asking, and it was part of a piece of research work based on the information
that's
that's
fine.
been
Happy
provided.
to
So
take questions
the
on
committee can write to you on that.
I think probably more as a suggestion in the future, it would be helpful if accounts didn't have such a high percentage categorised as other. Because one of the criticisms of Translink's accounts has been trying to understand what they're actually about. So we'll leave it at that and follow it up. The success of the railways has been phenomenal. Got that word right. Why are the buses not similar? Given that the capital expenditure in buses has been horrendous. Anybody coming to Northern Ireland, the first thing they're bound to notice the freshness of the buses, which is a complete contrast to what it was 17 years ago when this assembly took over. They were clapped done, the trains were rotting, the permanent way was dangerous. Massive capital expenditure into all that. Why are the buses not producing the same results as the trains?
Maybe.
If you don't mind, I'll ask Philip to answer the detail, but just prior to he does, and I hope it doesn't undermine anything he's about to say, I think we need to be just a little smidgen careful that the growth in railways has been so phenomenal that we're then looking at bus and going, this is nowhere near, and that's right, it isn't near the railways. The railways investment, particularly the new trains, and I know yourself and the other members of the committee have been huge supporters of that, has really taken off, and that's been a huge success story, which is worth celebrating. If you look at bus companies right across the UK and indeed in the south, they are all struggling with patronage. So I think bus is following the trend of these islands. It's just that compared with the huge success story of rail here, it looks poor. But I'll let Philip cover some of the operational things that we're doing in order to address.
I'll try and keep it brief. You're quite right. Overall, it's a very challenging market for public transport generally, notwithstanding the fact that the rail side of the business has been hugely successful. But equally, I think we have to recognise within bus it's a very wide category. So you have Metro, you have Ulster Bus. Within Ulster Bus, for example, Gold Line, hugely successful. The member will realise 7% growth this year. So you'll accept that where the proposition, improvements in frequency and refresh of timetables and the whole marketing and branding, I mean, there is definitely a latent market that we're still tapping into and continue to do so. Our airport services, very successful. They've grown 2% this year. And of course, one of the areas that we believe for the future, which is very innovative, where you're making the multimodal shift, is in park and ride. And you'll notice the number of park and rides that are now being either enhanced or, in some cases, new investment, and the growth in them has been absolutely phenomenal. I think it's 13% year on year. But you're quite right. Remember, the challenge is the rest of the network. Obviously, in Ulster Bus, a very significant number of our passengers are scholars or pupils, which is very positive for the region in terms of modal share equals safe, effective, environmentally friendly transport. If you get young people on buses early, it reduces the number of cars on the road. It's a decongestion measure. But one of the things, and we'll maybe get on to it later, obviously any network needs refreshed as well, continually reviewed, and that's what we're doing currently. You'll see some of the changes we're doing in Metro, and also you'll see what we're doing to try and offset some of the downturn, which is largely macro. I mean, the economy is definitely under pressure, and we're seeing some things there that have affected us. But that's why we've stepped up to the plate in terms of every opportunity with big events to support them and provide the service is also welcome. But hopefully that gives you a wee flavour. It's quite a complex mix of businesses and products, but we're looking at every one of those to try and exploit them further.
If I may, just one short sentence. We've reached 80 million passenger journeys, which has been incredible growth driven primarily by railways in recent years. We want to achieve 100 million passenger journeys, and a large part of that further growth will be in bus, and that's what we're targeting. We have a bus strategy which we've developed over recent times within the organisation, and that's linked to the things that Philip have been mentioning, primarily around park and ride and mass movement of people in and out of main towns and the city of Belfast.
And basically investing in routes that have the best potential, and that's starting to come out through.
I'm just going to tell you that there, David, because mass investment in main towns. What about the rural connection? Nearly every one of us around this table are representing rural constituencies, and there has been a drive from DRD, and just by your last statement, sounds like Translink as well. We're going to concentrate on the main towns and stuff the villages and country roads.
Well, if you go back to the comment...
Just using your words.
Well, no.
You didn't use the word stuff now, can you?
No, we didn't use the word stuff, sorry.
Well, I live in a small rural village as well. But the point I made at the start in respect of the service adjustments, we're not leaving any community without a service. But the reality is, if we want to achieve 100 million passenger journeys, we need to focus on the areas where there are the biggest potential to grow numbers. And I'm sorry, but that, in my view,
but you can't leave the rest of the community behind.
No, and that we're not. And the service adjustments we've made, or are proposing to make,
maintain those linkages.
Maintain all of those linkages. But the future investment, I suppose, what I'm talking about is for the future. The future investments, so the further investment in park and ride, and in additional services, more frequent, more reliable, and at 10-minute intervals, has to be. There's no point putting it on between the village of Brisbane and Ballymena, a 10-minute service, which is where I live, to carry no one, but on these main thoroughfares to get people in and out of the city, and that's where we will drive the passenger numbers. And some of those park and rides, we're not talking about necessarily just dotted on the outskirts of the city of Belfast. We're talking about, getting...
Or at rail stations, which has traditionally been the model. We've actually found that where we have built dedicated bus-based park and ride, they've also been hugely successful. Tamlamore being and Ballymena, Dunsilley there. You're actually seeing those now where there's a need to further expand those.
Except whenever you're asked to go further on down the M2, you just want to expand it. I remember having them out at the one at Ballygruby roundabout, which is sitting jam-packed to capacity, but aren't interested in investing any additional money there to...
And you're back to that whole system approach where there has to be a vision, because the various partners have to come together.
We need to get your sunglasses off you then, Philip, because I mean, if we want to move large numbers, we're giving you large numbers in Ballygruby roundabout and in other small locations where there is successful park and ride. It took years to convince Translink and DRD to move the one in Templepatrick that was bursting to capacity, and thankfully we've now soon see the one open at...
We have to, you would accept, Chair, we also have to work with partners to make those investments work. I mean, Ballymartin,
as long as you started the conversation, my problem is it was no, there's one on 5 miles down the road at Dunsilley, but that you can't tell that to someone who's already catching a lift with someone else who's prepared to stop at Ballygruby. We need the ones that you have expanded, which is taking us further into the country, and I mean that's why I'm definitely going to push you in that one there, because this whole drive just towards urban-centric transport system, because that's what it sounds like, and stuff this rural system. And DRD taking funding off community transport systems. I mean, it's all. If you live in the country, it doesn't really matter. But if you live in the towns, we'll look after you.
Without a doubt, Chair, if we had 10-20 million to invest in park and ride, it's probably fair to say that park and ride across our network is busting. Because when a new park and ride opens, within a very short space of time, it's full, and that's seen in the number of people on the trains. It's unheard of, or it has been unheard of in Northern Ireland, that people stand on trains. Those who've lived in GB will know that that's a common occurrence. But it's the case that we're managing a limited pot of resources, and we would love to expand park and rides all over, but in the current funding environment, that's not possible. But we have maintained the rural connectivity, and the future vision for the bus strategy is creating those remote park and rides and getting people from the rural villages to those locations, and then you have the fast, reliable, regular service from there into the city, which is where people are travelling.
I'll give you one for the record and let John back in. You're talking about connecting. I had Translink in Rundlestown, where you'll know what's at, David, on the map. They said it would be cheaper to give them a taxi, to get them to Markerfield, to get them the express to Belfast. So it's cheaper to give them a taxi, to get them to Markerfield, to go to the opposite direction, to get them onto an express to get them to Belfast, rather than connecting a service to a small village that's got an inadequate park and ride facility because it's bursting to the seams. But Translink and DRD weren't interested in investing more money to develop that there, to allow for more passenger numbers.
Could I come back very briefly?
You could.
I mean, in this wider view that we'll have to take, there has to be a joined up approach. The conventional bus can't solve all those problems. I think you would accept that for locations such as the one you've described, we also have to bring in other partners such as community transport, car share. We have to look innovatively
You
at
could if they weren't cutting it by a third.
But I mean, that's why we have to take a whole system look. It has to be a regional.
And car share is park and ride. And
Absolutely.
Park and ride's full.
Well, car share could be to locations where people can connect with mainstream public transport. Yeah. That's the sort of vision. And
Sorry,
there's other
John,
modes as
I
well.
cut across here, John.
Dervin, you're all right. We all want to be local, and I have to keep forgetting that we lost our train service on 31st of August 1959. We have to move on. Maybe just, if I lived in Broxhian, I wouldn't want a bus to Ballymena. It's a beautiful village. Wouldn't want to leave it. Maybe just to return to
the centre.
Return it to the financial reporting. The financial reporting manual, FEM, details public sector financial reporting, suggests Translink should be disclosing the pay and benefits of all members of the board, including non-executive members, within the remuneration report. Do you believe it's important that Translink complies with the reporting requirements under FEM financial reporting manual in order to enhance Translink's accountability and transparency and to help demonstrate good governance. I'm particularly interested in getting an answer to that question because the reporting mechanisms of Translink in the past have tended to not be particularly clear. Now, maybe in answering that question, David or Philip or whoever does it, I mean, you mentioned with reference to the pension pot at the beginning in your opening remarks. Can you maybe tell us if there's a different pension pot for seniors, management and directors as opposed to drivers and manual workers?
Okay, take the various parts of your question. Yes, I do believe in that transparency, and I have no. I certainly believe in that fully, and I believe it is disclosed within the remuneration report on page 46, and then also in note 23 to the accounts, page 86, where the emoluments of all directors, both executive and non-executive, are disclosed. In relation to the pension scheme, there is an executive pension scheme, which is a small scheme. It's closed to new entrants. I'm not a member of it. Philip's not a member of it. That scheme has been closed long before. I'm not sure of the exact date of its closure, but it was closed long before I joined the organisation. No, I wouldn't want to be part of it. I'm quite happy. I'm a member of the Nilgos scheme, as are our employees, as is Philip, and as are our employees. Hopefully that answers your query on the executive remuneration. But the full disclosure of the pay and benefits of all executive and non-executive directors is given in the annual report on page 46 and on page 86.
Well, obviously you've done a great deal of work planning after you leave. In terms of asking relevant questions about these issues we're asking this morning, you will know that the Minister has announced a new board, or am I mixing this up with water? New board of directors from December?
The current position with our own board, we have a new chairman who took up position from the 1st of July.
A new old one?
He was previously on the board. The remaining, all the other non-executive directors, their term expires on the 31st of December this year, so there's currently a process ongoing to appoint a suite of new non-executive directors to the board who will take up position on the 1st of January next year.
Well, in terms of monitoring finances, asking relevant questions, so on, has any thought been given to the role they might have in actually scrutinising this company on a day-to-day basis?
Their appointment, and this will sound like a politician's answer, it's not meant to be, but their appointment is not mine to make.
Are you saying something disparaging about politicians?
No,
That answer?
I'm not trying to avoid the question, but the appointment of those members is entirely a matter for the department, and I will have no input.
I have no doubt that the Minister and everybody will be aware that there's a Commissioner for Public Appointments and they will comply with best practice. That wasn't really the question. The question was, when these people sit down around the board table, will they be doing more than having the morning coffee? Will they actually be doing the work that we're doing this morning?
Well, our board, and actually I'm missing part of a board meeting to be here this morning. Our board,
you shouldn't have done that.
Our board do scrutinise what we do and certainly challenge me and have challenged me on what we're doing to address the financial issues we've had. And I've no doubt the new members of the board, whoever those will be, will continue the same practice.
So, are you telling me there's no room for improvement?
In everything in life, there's room for improvement.
Now, that's a politician's answer.
You would know that now.
Can we come back to you, John, maybe? Are you nearly finished?
I just want to maybe very briefly pick up on something you're developing, albeit very parochial. The rural service will be influenced in no small way by what the Minister does in other directions. For example, wiping out the community transport subsidy or taking the money out of disability action. How Where does this leave integrated transport? I mean, park and rides are fine for the people who are able and all that and can park their little cars and hop on the buses. But there's an awful lot of people in the rural communities who desperately need another means of getting to the main line, buses and trains. So it's more than just park and ride, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt.
It is this joined up
Yes.
approach. Certainly, I have to be careful because I could risk straying into policy areas which are very clearly the remit of the Minister and his officials. But certainly in our changes, and I know we'll come to those, we have seen opportunities, and we've always seen opportunities, and we liaise very closely with the community transport. I realise the pressures that they face in regards to budgets, very similar to the difficulties that we're also facing. But certainly we continue to liaise with them and talk to them about ways we could collaborate to make sure there is that more joined up or that connection. But I think it's one of those areas that personally, from a policy point of view, someone has to take that leadership role and drive that agenda forward. And maybe, to be fair, in the current financial climate, that's maybe hard to see beyond, you summarise it, rose-tinted glass. But I think you've always got to be visionary. It is a small region. It's characterised by low densities of population, makes public transport quite challenging in some areas, and that's why we have to always be open-minded to more innovative, collaborative approaches. And they're not necessarily mainstream public transport, but the mainstream provider, in this case us, has to be in a position to assist in any way they can, and we stand willing and able to do that.
Okay, but just before Cathal, just in the back of that, do you have any voluntary conversations with the community transport?
Oh, yes, we would work very closely. But it's not just community transport. There's other initiatives out there. You know, the department.
But there's a voluntary thing there.
Oh yes, I mean,
there's a huge amount of engagement between us and other providers.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Because we see it as a joined up public transport model, and these, they all feed into our service, and we try and coordinate our services as much as possible.
That's fair enough. Okay, Cathal, you're next.
Nice. Thank you, Chair. David, can I add to my congratulations to yourself and wish you well in your new position as well.
Members, there's a phone actually ringing there if someone want to chat. I'm sure they're all turned off, but one must be on by mistake.
Don't mind, Chair.
sorry, just now, it's just you can hear it, and I'm sure it's going to interfere.
Philip, I think you said 70% increase in the use of the gold liners.
7%.
7%. Oh, sorry, I heard you wrong there. But 13% then in park and ride. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, the main route, and you know where I'm going with this one. The main route within park and ride, I would consider is the 212 route.
212 is a very strong route for us. Yeah. Yes.
You see a bus going on that route every 10 minutes from 5:30 in the morning. There, very huge amount of people. But the 212 route, if you look at it, when you talk about park and ride, is that it's roughly about 75 miles on the 212 route, and for almost half of that, between Drumahoe and Mahara, which is a distance of some 33 miles, there is no park and ride. In fact, currently, they're using the hard shoulder in one place and the front forecourt of two schools in the other cases. When are you going to address that? Because that is one of the really baffling issues, I think, in terms of park and ride provision, because it's causing real issues in both those places, and it's quite actually dangerous.
Yeah. In your broader question, because I know it's wider than just that route, but that's a very good example. Chair, I think at some point we'd be very happy to give the committee an update on the bus strategy, if that's possible, and that might help give you visibility of the sort of thinking that we have, because it is regional. But on your specific route, yes, we'll always look for opportunity sites. Clearly, we can put forward suggestions. We don't own land, but we can make recommendations. And
there's a big mountain up there that's not used very much.
Sorry?
There's a big mountain up there that's not used very much.
Well, sometimes partners such as T&I, things change there other partners such as NIW, sites become available, under the D1 process, and we would keep a very close eye if there's a site that comes up that we think we could use, because that's the importance of this group. It does have that ability, albeit it doesn't buy very much property anymore, but it could actually do it and enter into some arrangement. I'd also have to caution the big attraction and the huge success of that parking or that route is the direct end-to-end, largely end-to-end, and very fast, very competitive journey times with cars. So there's always this balance. The parking rights need to be very close. You need to be able to get in, swing out, and keep moving. But that's not to say there aren't opportunities on it. If you had sites that you think we should be looking at that we're not already talking to you about, I'd be very happy for you to get in contact with me.
Well, I did identify a site which now is gone actually, and it's not. I think that was a chance.
I know you're talking to our area manager regularly about sites. You'll know he's as proactive as he can be within the remit of the organisation. Yeah.
Okay. Just in terms of the 80 million passenger journeys going up to the 100 million there. The 2013 report covered the passenger miles covered in that as well. It doesn't do in the last 2 years. Why is that?
Okay, well, it's certainly a statistic that we would, it's freely available. We'd be happy to give it.
Yeah. Again, because that's certainly, I know that a lot of people have used those, and I welcome also the fact that you've extended the hours, although it's not the same. You can get a 212 from Belfast out at 1 o'clock in the morning. The last one in Derry left at 10 o'clock at night. I think it's now been extended to 11 o'clock, or will be extended. So there's a bit of dichotomy there. David, you did say that no community would be left without a service, but in the rural areas, do you not accept that a reduction in service is sometimes as good as the removal of a service? Well,
I don't, because if there is still a service there, I think that's a different thing from the service being withdrawn and no further service.
Just the consultation, and I have to say, like we, as elected members, we were consulted as well, which I welcome, but we were able to point out some of the issues, particularly the triangle one. I'm thinking Korean which services a lot of the university there and whatnot, and a reduction there has huge implications for those students who use it as well. So, and likewise, I think the Lumma Valley Town service, which would have been one which is a town which is fairly spread over, and a lot of particularly older people don't have cars. The overall frequency, how much is that? How much has that been reduced, or how is that much proposed to?
Generally, what I can do is characterise in order to maintain the coverage, because what came out of our research and our consultation very strongly was this view that whilst passengers recognised, and they clearly did recognise, that the level of the cuts was so severe that there would clearly be an impact, they did state a very clear preference to retain the connections, retain the network coverage, retain their route, albeit they may have to look at alternatives, and that alternative might be to go for a journey behind or a journey in front by extending the frequency, by extending out the frequency. So yes, in an ideal world, no one wants to lose a frequency on their service, but they realised, and this is where the consultation was very powerful for us, in talking to us and discussing the issue more broadly, they recognised that this was the best option.
And will the reduction in service or frequency result in any job losses outside of those that might be covered by the voluntary redundancy scheme?
What we're doing is we have a number, because obviously we've given you the number that we feel we have to achieve in order to effectively live within the 3-point plan that David has talked about. And operations, frontline operations, is clearly a key part of that, because that's the biggest part of our business. But what we have done since November, whenever the funding cuts were very strongly signalled to us, we took steps to try and mitigate or ameliorate what might be the final budget settlement. You always hope that the budget settlement will not be as bad, but unfortunately it has been. And what we did is we have held recruitment as far as we can. So in actual fact, the net number of people involved is much reduced from what it was originally envisaged.
If I may, on the management overhead and supervisory and admin process that we've just run, we've been able to fill it entirely. We were well oversubscribed for the voluntary exit scheme. It's my belief that And these are only proposals at this stage because we're currently engaged in a process with the unions and the department in respect of these adjustments to services going ahead or not, or going ahead in some adjusted form. But if they do go ahead as they're proposed, it's my belief that without a shadow of a doubt we'll be able to meet that through a voluntary scheme. And certainly we're well aware of drivers, and they've made it known to us that they want to go through a voluntary exit scheme, and they would actually welcome a voluntary exit scheme. So the management and supervisory scheme we've had, I think, shows that we'll be able to achieve the numbers, and that was in a smaller pool of employees. And I don't believe we'll be seeking a huge amount more employees to leave the organisation through on the operational side of the business. So I think without a doubt we'll be able to achieve those through voluntary.
Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, Declan, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the feedback from the consultation and some of the recommendations that you're making, and it's just supposed to be more of a point of information. Where can we drill down on some of this here information? You know, I see a note that in many of the areas it says that there'll be most service routes will be maintained, albeit reduced frequency, and you know, many of the areas. So where can we get that information to drill down on it? And what's the next steps in terms of this process?
I'll take the Chair's guidance, but these are proposals. I have to make sure people are clear. There's a parallel process running. The Minister has with one of the main unions. So this proposal is simply that at this stage.
Can I just say, Philip, that's where maybe, and I did try to say at the start, members, we weren't necessarily to have a site of this consultation because of the other process was in place. But it was my concern last week when I met the officials that the other process should conclude during the summer.
Yeah.
Whatever the outcome, it would have meant we wouldn't have been involved in the process at all. So we asked the department last week and Translink if we could get sight of this week.
Yeah.
So really this is still a bit premature in terms of the timing.
I would characterise this, it's not the final position.
Yeah.
I've tried, and I know this, and apologies, a bit longer than you would probably be used to taking a paper, but we've tried to summarise as best we can. There's a lot of detail in here. In an ideal world, it would be very welcome to be able to talk to people like yourselves to actually let you see what this actually entails. Because a lot of this, where we say there's a reduction, you know, that could be the odd journey to best maximise the use of resources. So from that point of view, that's probably the ideal way to take that forward. But at the moment, we're giving you a sense of the shape of the proposals that are basically in place or proposed.
Well, that's fair enough. I just want that point of information, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Adrian, sorry, Adrian.
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning to yourselves. Probably up until 2 weeks ago, I ran family businesses, and I had to, unlike yourselves, I had to make a profit. I'm looking at 2 KPIs based on turnover and profit before tax. For any business, they're incredibly important. I appreciate, well, turnover's down by, I think it was 2.5 million. Your profit before tax has decreased to 8.7 million. You put into place a 3-point plan, which, and I appreciate fully, all this is very new to me, this 13 million reduction that you were faced with, but when, if I was an investor, when would I see Translink break even or make a modest profit? And I appreciate, I think David used the words, you know, break even. When will that happen?
It's forecast to happen by the year 2017-18.
So next year we'll see potentially a decrease in turnover again, or will that?
Well, in terms of profitability, so the year we're currently in, so 15-16, we're forecasting a loss of around 14 million. The following year, 16-17, we're forecasting a loss of around 4 million, and then the following year, 17-18, we're forecasting to return to profit, the 3 million. Now, why does it take that length of time to return to profit? Because the service adjustments and the changes we're making will take time to feed through in terms of real savings delivered.
Long-term benefits for them.
Yes, yes. Now, in respect of the service adjustments, we're making those will deliver and with people exiting the organisation, those will deliver relatively quick savings. But then fare increases in line with inflation then help bring us back to profitability by 17-18. But you're right to say, you know, I've always worked in organisations and run organisations where, you know, you must deliver a profit, and I believe it's exactly the same imperative for Translink. You know, Translink can't continue to incur losses, and so that's why we are putting the plan in place. We've been hit this year with a massive in-year shock in terms of the reduction in funding we're receiving, and that therefore means if this was in GB, these services would have gone long ago, because
These are the services you're consulting on at this moment.
yes, because you can't say to an organisation, here's a package of money and here's a suite of services we want you to provide, and then say, okay, we're going to cut the funding you receive by 20%, but we want you to provide the same services. That's not tenable. Now, what we are doing is that we're addressing through fare and through management overheads, we're saying, let's try and lessen the impact of those service adjustments that we have. But in my view, it's impossible to return to profitability without adjusting our services in some way. But what we're trying to do is minimise that through taking out inefficiency and overhead cost if we can.
Just, I suppose, for many people, Chair, I know you're going to make a loss next year, or this year, 14 million, and a projected loss the following year, 4 million. It's unsustainable, but...
Well, part of the loss this year is the cost of delivering the exit schemes that we're currently engaged in. So part of that will be redundancy cost.
Another thing for the benefit of the right court as well, and maybe for your benefit, Adrian, the proposal in terms of these service reductions would possibly have been in place only for an agreement with the Minister to allow the unions to come up with an alternative proposal. So whatever Translink suggests these efficiencies may bring to the table is going to be pushed back further back, because the Minister has quite rightly afforded the unions an opportunity to come up with an alternative proposal. They believe they can do it a different way. The Minister is going to look at that. But if that doesn't come to fruition, the savings that Translink may have made by the reduction are going to be some months longer before they get the benefit of those. Isn't that right, David, from my understanding?
Yes, that's right.
I appreciate, Chair, I mean, you're talking about a 20% reduction in income. You just overnight cut 20% of your services, Chairman. I could do that in the private sector.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to complain. My customers may not like it, but,
Yeah.
but you're key stakeholders, David, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
David, I think you want to buy in.
If I may, two quick questions, one on the accounts and one on these bus reductions. David, we're awaiting a report on the rapid transit project covering an assessment review and a revised business plan. You have the Belfast Rapid Transit contract. Will this revised business plan mean a revised contract? And can you tell us, what does the project assessment review mean to you? What does it entail for you?
If I may, Philip, as a detail, I think I can answer most of your question, but I just would be concerned to give you a wrong steer on one or two aspects.
I think because of the nature of Belfast Rapid Transit, it's clearly quite a unique proposal. I think the department have decided to review it under what we would know as the POWER, that type of mechanism. And certainly we participated because clearly we're a key stakeholder. It wouldn't be right to say we have a contract. We're operator designated at the minute, so we're sort of in waiting. We're waiting the agreement for the project to go ahead. Obviously, we're working on it. We're working in conjunction with the department on it.
Did you not tender for it?
No, there was no tender for the rapid transit. The market testing.
Have you agreed a cost with the department?
We have provided the department with the operating costs on the basis of the operating plan that was in their business case, and also clearly the business case was done some years ago. Changes in travel patterns and various other things that they have asked us to look at, and this assessment review will actually cover all of that. And I think the objective is to give, excuse me, the department and really the Minister a confidence rating in regards to the management arrangements that are in place and the efficacy of the business case.
So effectively, as far as we would be concerned, all the knowledge that we have and the inquiries we made about Belfast Transit, and I have a particular interest in it because of where it's starting in Dundonald.
Sure.
That is going to be reviewed. It may just work out as an entirely different thing at substantial increased costs.
I think the terms of reference of the review, and I have to stress, I not carrying out the review, I participated in it, but certainly my understanding of it is similar to what was done in other PAR reviews, is basically to look at the entire project, its original aims and objectives, and make sure they give the Minister a sense if that's still on course or any improvements or changes that are necessary. And I'm sure cost will be a major factor in that. They'll look at those, make sure that it's still aligned with the business case.
I could say, Chair, I'm very pleased I asked the question, and I'm delighted with your answer. Because I can tell you that the folk out there have a high expectation of Belfast Rapid Transit project. The people down the Upper Newtonards Road and the Newtonards Road have put up with a lot of changes to the road to facilitate this. And I would hope that there would be no significant delays. I sense that we are likely to be facing delays on the proposed or anticipated timescales that had been voiced.
As part of their assessment, and it's just my understanding, clearly they would look at the time frame, the time plan, the various measures that are being introduced. And as you know, it's been incremental. The bus priority measures are rapidly moving forward. And in fact, we're benefiting as an organisation from those. And hopefully, I think the committee, they're coming from the committee for approval, the introduction of new bus lanes. I know myself and colleagues are anxiously awaiting, hopefully, your approval so as we can use those lanes and get the benefit for customers of reduced journey times. But that's really what that process is designed to do. It's a critical look at it.
In any sense, in your 3-year plan, has been the operational cost of this rapid transit scheme. Are they included in that? Are they outside this 3-year period?
Anything.
I'm thinking about your return to profitability in year 3.
Yeah, it's a bit too early because we haven't actually been given a contract for the operation of it. That is part of the next stage. Yeah. Okay, so that would then in turn, and I'm only surmising, in turn that will form part of the wider public service contract that I know the committee have had a view of.
So in essence, and briefly just on this one, you have not factored in any costs relating to this scheme regarding your 3-year plan and your estimates for moving from loss into profitability?
No, because the BRT time frame is to be determined. We have to wait to be told what will be in the contract, and then we'll factor that into our plan and our arrangements. Because obviously there are other services that run parallel with it, and we have to view those. I understand the
difficulties you have in doing business with this department when such a major and significant contract is hanging out there and you don't know, you can't even plan for it and do that. Anyway, I really appreciate, Chairman, that information, and I hope being Hansard, so I hope it'll be detailed. Could I take on what you said about rural bus services and the target of rising from 80 to 100 million movement passengers? Is this leap, this increase, part of the 3-year plan?
It's a plan over a number of years. It's like a 2020. 2020.
Oh, so I thought you said 20 years. 2020.
No, 2020. I think it's a fairly ambitious plan, but it's
well,
the target's been set by.
You have to aim high. So this is your legacy, David, that you're leaving them. Then this is this 2020 get there. The reason I'm asking that is I need to reconcile how you can leap from 80 to 100 million by 2020, yet you're on a course of reductions in rural areas. So, and I sense that you're going to be chopping more services in rural areas. So, where is this growth? Where's the growth coming from? If you're cutting out areas and rural areas in particular, how do you make that up? If you chop 10, how do you put 40 back?
With the service adjustments that we propose, we have still maintained the same passenger target for next year. So while we are proposing to...
Where are you getting the extras from? I mean, if you're cutting services...
Well, there's two things. One, there is the growth in rail, which is continuing to drive passenger numbers forward. But the point I suppose I was going to make is that the services we're proposing to adjust are the services that are used less frequently, and therefore the passengers affected are smaller. So,
okay, could I take you up on that? Just, everybody else has been talking about their constituency, so just bear with me. My community, my constituency, and surrounding constituencies, we have no linkage to railways. They were taken away 100 years ago from us. So there's even less movement now with reliable and frequent bus services. Can't emphasise enough the dependency that there is on the bus service. To my community, Translink is a bus service.
Yes, understand.
Different views on it, but it's a bus service and nothing else. What I wanted to just ask you is, what's the chances of that policy of cutting out and cutting back in rural area services? What's the chances of that being reviewed? What do I have to do to get it reviewed?
I'm not sure I can answer that, member. But if the budget cuts that we have faced, we've had to respond to those. Now, if I could, and I mean this genuinely, if I could save all of this reduction in funding that we're receiving through cutting management, I would do that. The last thing I want to do is cut frontline services.
I understand that, and I'm very sympathetic to the financial aspects and what you're trying to deal with. I'm dealing with the community. I'm dealing with people's activities and their lives.
Absolutely.
You're wiping them out. You're taking away their rights. You're taking away their ability to travel because of the cuts that you're making. Can I come back? I don't know how to put it another way. Well, how does my community lobby you? Because this is your policy.
Well,
it's not the department's policy. This is your policy to cut these services.
Well, two things. I think the way to avoid any impact on frontline services is for additional funding. So that has to come either from DFP or DRD. But we receive the funding. We're told the funding we're getting, and we design a service around that funding. But back to the point, the service is not being removed altogether. Now, I accept if someone wants to travel, they may well have to wait until the next service or go on the earlier service. But
where there's a community with total reliability on bus that needs to get to doctors, that needs to get to hospitals, that needs to get to work, that needs to do this, that and the other, total reliability grew up with the service.
Yes.
Right? You have wiped that out.
They will still have
in
a
the
service
communities for them to adjust their timetables to suit your timetables. So you're asking the public to adjust their timetables to suit your timetables. What I'm saying is, the public are up in arms in my community about this. So how can they change your mind? This is a community, total reliability on buses.
Well, back to the point, the service isn't being removed. Yes, you're right that someone needs to move their schedule to follow the bus timetable.
But the hospitals don't change their timetables. The doctors don't change their timetables. The schools don't change their timetables.
Yeah.
The nursery services don't change their timetables.
To my mind, and I'm well open for reviews, to my mind, the only way of avoiding impact on frontline services is for additional funding. And I don't have the power I don't have the power to obtain that additional funding. That has to come through
Disappointed with that. I thought there would be more imagination coming from a company with your strengths and your abilities. Really, you're beginning to sound like the minister. The only way we can do this is with more money.
We have to remember, David McNary, that is, we do have to remember that we would be critical of the organisation if it continued to run at a loss. So I'm listening to what David Strahan's saying, and he's telling what he has to do based on the hand he has been dealt. This is not necessarily entirely private organisation who would have different options open to them. So we are very dependent on public money here. One of the things that strikes me, and I mean I'm critical, I join with you, David, in some of the criticism. However,
the point that you make about public money is very relevant.
But however, David,
the public's money who are not getting value for that money.
But yes, and they're not going to get value for money in rural constituencies where sometimes there's only 1 or 2 persons on a bus because of the frequency. That is an issue that, I mean, we will all shout from the rooftop about our constituents, but we have to remember, in terms of that value for money, we've got 45-seater buses with 2 passengers on them at many times. What we are not running, Translink are not running a taxi service in many occasions. But, and I mean, I think, and this is where we've touched this before you were there, where one of the members in this committee was concerned about the frequency because he was going to have to wait 2.5 minutes longer on his bus. I mean, I think that people will be flexible to a degree, but we have to live in the real world with some of this as well.
I'm not talking about 2.5 minutes. I'm just talking about a disruption to people's lives that I think is most unfortunate, and I think the policy should be reviewed. I was on a protest, a white line protest, against what's happening to my brothers in Twadell. I saw the buses coming, city buses coming into Stormont, right? And I did see what you said, 2 and 3 people on the 5 buses that passed me in that 1 hour I was there. That's not a rural service. That's your pink buses coming through. So it just doesn't apply to the rural service. I do think, really, I don't think anybody disagrees, and I know you would all be sympathetic. I'm just saying that where there is total dependency on a bus service, perhaps somebody might review this in some manner. Perhaps, I agree with you on the size of the buses, the number of people in them, perhaps some cooperation, community bus services, etc., where they're smaller buses, etc. I just think that it's, particularly for the elderly, it's hurting them.
All I can say is that certainly I am in a place where I would wish not to be. I would have wished my tenure to have been in entirely different circumstances. However, I'm faced with the reality of what we're facing. But I remember I did say, I think on the first committee appearance, that this will drive, and I know the budget is happening today, and I don't want to try to be a prophet, but all the commentators are there's further cuts coming. I don't know if that will affect Northern Ireland. I don't know if it will affect DRD. I don't know if it will affect Translink. But I know what my gut tells me it probably will. This leads us to the debate of the type of public transport service we want. And we can only deliver, if the funding is reduced, we can't deliver the same, we just physically can't deliver the same service if our funding we receive from DRD is cut by 20%, because the reality is these services don't make money. Now, I'm not saying because they don't make money we should be rid of them all. That's because I fundamentally believe in public service. But this has to drive a debate on the level of public service we have, because what can't happen is that the level of public funding reduces by 20% and we have the same service. That's impossible.
Do you think a private company would be profitable in Northern Ireland and be able to deliver a service better than you're currently delivering?
I don't. And the experience of GB, and I've worked all my life in the private sector. I have no particular flag to wave for the public sector. But if you look at what happens in GB, where services are not profitable, the local council will put them out to tender and say to all the bus companies, okay, here's a service, we want this timetable delivered, and how much will we pay you for it? They all tender in, but there is a public subsidy there as well. But if that public subsidy is withdrawn, as is happening in GB, the service goes. And we've seen that in the south. Services are being removed every day. It's in our papers every single week.
I think that, finally, I think that your comment, and I welcome your comment on privatisation. I think that's most useful, and I wonder, would it be possible for your company to maybe give us a summary briefing as to why you don't? Mainly so that I would find it extremely useful to take to my constituents when we're discussing transport and say, this is where we are, because privatisation is a growing subject, shall I say. But so long as it's out there, then we need to discuss it. And I would find it helpful to have the benefit of your experience and professional experience. Thank you.
Members, time's ticking on, so Adrian, briefly, followed by Sean.
Thank you. Mr Chairman, just to pick up on David's question, privatisation, I think a private company would enter into profit in a very, very short period of time, but it would abandon completely the constituents that David quite rightly has campaigned for this morning. But to be blunt about it, I'm the new boy in this committee. It just seems to me DRD has had a huge cut in its available finances. It's been passed on to Translink, and I welcome the 3-point plan. I hope the service adjustments can be consulted upon admirably. I welcome back the unions and so on. I'll have an opportunity to do that as well. I hope the service adjustments will be compassionate to as many as we can, and they do include, we're focused very much in the rural community. I do feel that, as David maybe highlights, maybe there's some of the more urban routes that will be looked at and reviewed and timed and so on, so that the pain is shared among us all. My constituencies are urban and rural, like Trevor's. But I would say, I'm told DRD has faced £60 million of cuts, and that's passed on by 13 million to Translink. We are where we are. And
I'll go first, David. I'll go first in this one. I know you're new, Adrian.
Well,
DRD got the 4th best budget settlement of all the departments.
I'm not here to defend DRD.
No, I appreciate that. But we all know they lost money. They lost in and around, from start of budget year to start of the previous budget year, in and around £3 to £4 million. Now, the Minister has went out to the top of Stormont and everywhere else and shouted about £60 million. There's no one in this committee yet has been convinced, other than one member previously who's no longer on it.
I have to accept the Minister's position on it. The Minister, and he's had to pass on £13 million to Translink and many others. So
yes, and he took money off other departments to prop up NI Water, and he'd done other things. The reality is the Minister hasn't lost the money that he has spouted he has lost.
Well, we can agree to differ on that today. We can. We're here today dealing with Translink.
Yeah, but the reality is, but because Hansard is here, Hansard's here today, Adrian, to record this, and for accuracy, the DRD Minister did not lose £60 million from his resource budget from last year to this year. He has additional pressures, but he hadn't £60 million at the start of the year. But indeed, if he maybe didn't tell you in the briefing before you started the committee, he has bid for more. He has bid for more. He has bid for more in this committee in one monitoring round than he had in the whole of last year.
I'm trying to be constructive.
We're moving on.
Positive.
We're moving on. We're moving on that, Adrian. John Dallett.
I have to say, sorry, no, you had your say.
We're moving on. I know.
I'm
chairing the meeting.
Briefing the Minister.
I am chairing.
It's a figure I've heard quoted. I'll apologise if that's not the correct figure, but I've heard that figure. And what I'm saying is, it's made Translink's life very difficult.
Well, that's the hand that the Minister dealt Translink. Well, he took the 13 million.
We're not here just to condemn the Minister, Trevor.
No, his officials. John Dallett.
Chairperson, the last thing I will do is get involved in this, but I would encourage all members, and maybe particularly new ones, rise above party politics, play your role as scrutineers in the committee. The purpose this morning is to ask questions of Translink. I'm not sure what my party position is.
Right, well, John,
I don't really care.
Get to a question, maybe just
get to the question now, but it's important because I've been caught in this, which doesn't happen in this committee before. We get on great. The central point really, I believe, and this needs to be cleared up, Translink is in a better position than anybody else to provide a public transport service. From my point of view, that's central, and the question is, will you endeavour to ensure that that happens, and will you avoid any temptation to allow cherry picking of services, which in fact would make the plight of people in rural communities much more difficult and would simply replicate the disaster that took place in Britain and in the Republic? That's the question.
Yeah, appreciate those comments. I believe passionately in public service. I've always worked in public service organisations, albeit they're private sector, but they're providing a service that the public needs. I think the privatisation of transport in Northern Ireland would lead to the fragmentation of service and the withdrawal of vast areas of service in Northern Ireland. And I do agree Translink is the best enabler. I think it's better, albeit working with other partners where there's health sector, transport provision and the voluntary and community sector. I think we can act as partners to bring that all together, and even school transport as well. I think it's much better dealt with within one central organisation, albeit that organisation needs to be challenged to be efficient and to be effective, because what the committee is doing to ourselves and our board and the department, we need to be held to account. But personally, I believe that it's best delivered through an organisation like Translink.
And maybe just finally, would you agree that much has to be done, and maybe something can be learned from the success of the railway renaissance, that more needs to be done to encourage people to actually use buses where there are no trains aboard? Because it breaks my heart coming up here now 3 or 4 days a week and to be sitting in traffic there at the city airport to see one of the best railway services probably in the world travelling every few minutes, and yet only 1 car in 10 has more than 1 person in it moving into Belfast. Is that something that perhaps Translink has failed in, or is there particular people that live out in that direction who simply will not, in any circumstances, consider public transport?
Well, I know in another place and another day, and we discussed this issue and the whole issue of modal shift. I think if we cast our minds back, and I wasn't here at the time, but I've read the documents and I've looked at the comment at the time. Whenever the rail investment strategy was put together, I don't think anyone believed we would see. Now, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Philip. I don't think anyone believed we would see the growth in rail that we have seen. It's been a huge success story. I honestly believe the same is the case with our bus strategy. The bus strategy is exciting, it's visionary, and I believe it can deliver the growth that we have set out. Now, it does require capital investment, but it's not the bus strategy is not all duck or no dinner. It can be delivered, or part of it can be delivered with less financial resources until we reach a time where we have more capital available. So I think you're right, there is more we can do, and the bus strategy is designed to achieve that growth in the bus side of the business.
Just on a lighter note,
very welcome.
John, maybe you could volunteer to park in Kilrea and Adrian could pick you up on the way past.
Oh, you pick me up now.
And I could pick you up.
I'm not picking you up anyway.
No, John. No, don't be a
Just going back, David, there was, and I did try to, to bring members up to speed in terms of the unions having the conversation with the minister. And I suppose, in essence, if you could have implemented your plan, the savings would have started much sooner, or the minister stroke department. I wouldn't want to blame it just on the minister. Have you had any early indications of what their plan looks like to try and assist you in the reductions of your costings?
Chair, I wouldn't want to go into too much detail. I return on Monday. I've been dealing with an awful lot of material on my return. I suppose that there is still time in the process to run, so that the process is not ended. But I think in any proposal that comes forward, what I will be looking to see is, does it deliver the savings we need this year? Because we need to deliver these savings now. So there's still time to run, so I wouldn't want to jump the gun in terms of the process that the unions have available to them.
Do you want to?
Jay, you mentioned the timetable. That's going to be over the summer period.
Yeah, and that's why we've actually had the consultation today, because the minister because the minister gave an ear to the unions, which I mean is fair enough.
Yeah.
There's no one saying other than that. The difficulty with that is,
We kept
yes, we'd probably get something. You could email the members during the summer. That's why we've done the consultation today, because we'd never got them together. But if this hadn't happened, Adrian, the 13 million that was lost, the gap could have been closed if that hadn't have happened, because the minister given that ear to the unions to come up with an alternative proposal, which in a sense, if it works, is good. But if it doesn't work, then there's an opportunity that's been lost for those savings to start sooner.
But we have proceeded with the management and overhead and admin savings, and that voluntary exit scheme has been opened, it's been closed. The people who have been, if you like, successful in applying through that scheme are currently working their notice, and they will have exited the business, and that's around 65 managers, supervisors and admin staff.
And for the record again, that's all voluntaries. There's nothing mandatory there.
In the 65, there may well be one or two voluntary. Compulsory. The 55, because we carried out a process prior to the end of last year where a number of people left the organisation. But the voluntary exit scheme that we've had open, which has been seeking 55 people, has been voluntary.
I thought you said earlier 65.
Yes. So from when I joined the organisation until today, there are 65 people leaving the organisation. 55 of those are through the voluntary exit scheme, and 10 we've dealt with in other processes.
Okay.
So the 10, there may well be some compulsories in there, but the voluntary exit scheme we have had open, which has been seeking 55 people, has been entirely voluntary. And that's the scheme that we've proposed to see, should these service adjustments take place, we would envisage opening up a voluntary exit scheme where people can apply, they'll get their numbers, and then they say, yes, I now want to go. And so we would see that being done through entirely a voluntary exit scheme.
Okay. Thank you. I think if members are content, we've covered all that ground, so thank you, David and Philip. And again, wish you, David, all the best. We may see you before you go, but if not, certainly wish you all the best.
Appreciate that. Thank
in
you.
your new role. Thank you. Okay, members. The members want a comfort break for a couple of minutes, maybe just.
Good idea.
Okay.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Okay, agenda item number 8. Oh, sorry, it's not actually. It's agenda item number 7, departmental briefing on the resource accounts. Okay, and we are going to welcome Regine Michaelinen and John McNeil. So just remind members again, as we are back in the open session, if we can just turn off your mobile phones, as they do interfere with recording equipment. And, John, is it yourself or Brigine's? Have you a presentation or anything first, or you want to go straight into?
I was going to make a few remarks, but I'm conscious also that time has moved on this morning, and that. But I will keep them brief. I do welcome the opportunity of coming to present the accounts to you and to explain the situation in relation to our accounts this year, and in particular the opinion of the CNAG, which has led to his qualification of part of the accounts. And I suppose I would emphasise that the CNAG, when he looks at any set of public sector accounts, he's effectively giving two opinions. Giving one opinion on the basis of, are the accounts true and fair, and are they in accordance with financial standards and proper standards? And on that basis, he's saying the accounts are fine. On the other hand, he also has to give an opinion as to whether the expenditure in the accounts comply with regulations, with parliamentary authority, with assembly authority, and with the delegations given to the department. And he is qualified on that basis. And the reason for that is tied back to the overspend that the department knew that it was, or was trying to address all the way through the year, and that it didn't get met. The pressures, the port's pressure wasn't met by the end of the year, and despite the department doing everything it could possibly do, the minister had issued a direction to continue to provide services for the benefit of the public in Northern Ireland. Hence, we had as a department, we had a budget overspend. And once you have a budget overspend, there's almost an automatic, that's taking into this what's called irregular spend territory. And hence, the CNAG was bound to draw attention to that, as he has done in his audit certificate, and he has also provided a report to his certificate which outlines the circumstances by which that overspend arose, and that's attached at the very, very end of the accounts, pages 121, 122.
John, it sounds all like a very nice, and Mr. CNAG is a nice guy, and it doesn't really matter that that he has qualified the accounts. The reality is that he has a role to do, and he can either not qualify them, or he can qualify them. And in your case, he went for the option to qualify your accounts, which is, I know you're trying to put you're putting a gloss on it, John. I mean, if they were up to scratch and everything was proper and right, the Controller and Auditor General would not be qualifying the accounts. Now, I should declare an interest because, and I'm sure John will in a moment as well, as being members of the Public Accounts Committee, all these occasions where accounts are qualified are took to the public accounts as well. So it's done for
yes,
correct reasons. It's not done because he disliked you or anyone within your department. He looked at your accounts and he qualified them quite rightly because there's a problem with the accounts.
yes.
Can you tell me, John, then, how many times DRD and its arm's length bodies have received qualified audits from... Sorry, put this to me. How many times DRD and its arm's length bodies have received a qualified audit opinion from an external auditor?
I don't have that information with me. I haven't sought to go back and to count up.
Well then I'll ask you a different question. But you can write
there will have been some occasions. There certainly were some occasions.
But I'm sure you can get us that information and you can forward that to the committee. In terms of the ministerial direction, we're all familiar with the most recent one. There was a ministerial direction to do with, I think it was the Korean to Londonderry line, and that was supported by DFP. In these accounts, there's another ministerial direction that wasn't agreed by DFP. Now, normally that gives the accounting officer of the department, or indeed the minister in this occasion, a degree of cover whenever it's signed off by DFP. But in these accounts, there's been another direction given that DFP didn't agree with. Could you maybe talk to that one for us, John?
There was a direction given by the minister in December, and at that stage, the department was facing the prospect of the overspend caused by the likelihood of not receiving any funding from the executive in monitoring rounds to address the port pressure, the port income pressure. At that stage, the minister was assessing the extent of the situation within the department. The port's pressure was £20 million. The department was taking action at that stage to reduce the port's pressure down to £13 million. The minister, taking account of the potential impact on public health and public safety, decided that further cuts should not be applied at that stage.
What areas was that for, John?
Pardon?
What areas was that for?
That was for a range of areas, covering both transport NI services, including winter services, and also Northern Ireland Water. It was deemed at that stage that there could have been further cuts of in the region of 8 to 9 million in transport NI and over 4 million in Northern Ireland Water. But the minister, in the interests, as I say, of public safety and public health, decided that that he directed the accounting officer to proceed to deliver those services and thus go into a situation where he was spending beyond the budget, the estimated budget limit at that point in time.
And the reasons is all, I mean, as you have said, good reason in terms of the winter service, road maintenance and essential, the travel for Transport NI, and I don't think anyone around this room would dispute those reasons. However, of a total budget of £782 million, he gave direction on £8.8 million. Why was some money not directed from other areas within that total budget, as opposed to actually going into an overspend situation?
Well, during the 14-15 year was a difficult year. During that year, the executive had imposed a 4.4% reduction on all departments, and for DRD that amounted to £15 million. So we had already reduced funding by £15 million from across the various areas of the department. Transport NI, we'd reduced Translink funding. We'd already received or achieved funding reductions to the tune of £15 million. On top of that, in the attempt to reduce the pressure from the non-receipt of the port income, there was a further £7 million reduction. Now, a considerable chunk of that 7 was again reduced funding in respect of Translink, and there was another 2 or 3 million reduction applied from other areas in the department, restricting the use of overtime, restricting the amount of travel, and therefore the opportunity to make further reductions. I hear what you say. We have a big budget, but a lot of that budget is actually tied up in funding services, funding contracts that we can't stop. And at that stage in the year, we were, this was at the point at which we couldn't stop further services without impacting on the public health and safety.
Can I just ask one final question before I call David McNarian? How many other occasions in the last 4 years have ministerial directions been rejected by the executive or DFP?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
In the last 4 years. So this is one occasion DFP. I mean, the most recent ministerial direction was supported by DFP for the Coleraine to Londonderry line. Yourselves or the Permanent Secretary wouldn't send it off, so there was a ministerial direction supported by DFP in relation to the business case. The one we're talking about today, the 8.1 million, wasn't supported by DFP.
Yeah, it was a 13 million direction. It wasn't 8.1.
Well, how many other occasions within the last 4 years, which is this mandate, has there been a ministerial direction that hadn't been supported by DFP?
Again, I don't have that information to hand.
I believe, just maybe for the record today, there was no other occasions. So, and maybe for the benefit of us all, I mean, whilst the reasons sounds all laudable, it seems strange that over the last 4 years there has been pressure here for considerable time that on this one occasion that you break away from set precedent, I suppose you could say, that you ignored what DFP's advice was and done a solo run. Well, you're talking about 13 million. That's nearly 15% of your total budget on an overspend. Am I right, John? No.
Well, not if you're saying the total budget was 798 million.
Oh, sorry, 7.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't want to quibble over percentages.
Well, what percentage is it? You said it was 15 million. It's 780. 10% 7.8. What's 15 million then?
10% 78, is it not?
Sorry, 78. Right, sorry, I'm going wrong. Yeah, I apologise. I'm going wrong.
No.
That's what it is.
The fact of the matter was that DFP couldn't approve the direction because to have approved the direction, DFP would have been authorising an overspend that was beyond the limit established by the Assembly, and that DFP couldn't do that.
So what you're saying, even in that answer, the department actually breached the Assembly's
And that's why
budget?
that's why the department breached the Assembly's Assembly's budget limit.
And everything seems okay with that. Okay, David, you're first to indicate.
Very welcome, John. Your report states that the department undertook detailed monitoring throughout the year on the arm's length bodies, including the Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company. Do you stand over that statement?
Whereabouts in the report does that?
In the research that I've been given, it's in the report that, in their words, in the section entitled "Oversight of Arm's Length Bodies."
That may. I'm coming prepared to address questions associated with the accounts.
I don't care what you're here for. I'm asking you a question.
And with the qualifications.
I'm asking you a question, a direct question, in the section entitled "Oversight of Arm's Length Bodies." This is a report, right? I'm asking you a question. Do you stand over what it says regarding that the department, your department, undertook detailed monitoring throughout the year?
I am aware that there is monitoring of arm's length bodies that is undertaken by the department throughout the year. What the precise wording that is in the annual report, I'm not familiar with, and if you have got detailed questions about particular aspects of that, I'm ready to hear it, but I suspect I will not be in a position to respond to your query.
The reason I'm asking you, do you stand over it? I'll put it another way. Do you stand over the report in its entirety?
Well, the annual report and accounts has been prepared by the department. It has been audited by the CNAG, and the annual report aspects have been assessed by the CNAG to be consistent with the annual accounts, and therefore the annual report and accounts should be, can be stood over. And
the reason I'm asking why anybody would stand over them, and just on a perhaps to some people a minor on a minor issue. In the Power report, it criticised the department for ineffective scrutiny of the Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company and Translink. So I'm just asking, in your position and in your very senior position, how can anybody stand over this aspect of the report? There are other aspects, but this particular aspect that we're dealing with, how can anybody stand over the detailed statement that the department undertook detailed monitoring throughout the year, yet the Power report criticised the department for ineffective scrutiny of the Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company and Translink?
Again, I would say that I'm not in a position to answer specific questions in relation to the annual report. I would hazard a guess that the Power report was in relation to specific aspects of monitoring of Translink in particular, whereas the statement that's in the annual report is probably speaking more in generality.
That's fair enough. In the generalisation of our work, right, which is scrutiny, we take people at their word, base level, of what they say to us. And in the course of our work and over the years, there was a general belief that the department engaged in detailed, regular monitoring of Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company and Translink. And heaven knows why not, because the that company is under constant scrutiny in this committee, and having to do so. But it appears that the scrutiny really wasn't up to scratch. So what I'm challenging is why your report, which you've just said the whole thing you'll stand over, well, anybody will stand over, so including yourself. I'm just asking. I understand you haven't got an answer, but perhaps you could come back to the committee and say that you stand over, your department stands over the words in its own report on the oversight of arm's length bodies, where it says the department undertook detailed monitoring throughout the year. So perhaps you could come back to us and just say we stand over that.
I'm happy to.
Okay, that's fine.
Respond to that question.
Thank you, John. In terms of just one final question, and perhaps you could clarify. We've just spent some time before you come in going over the annual accounts of Translink. From your position, could you clarify for me? Are the department content with these accounts?
Well, the accounts of Translink have also gone through an audit process by their external auditors. They have received an unqualified opinion on both the basis on which the accounts are established in compliance with accounting standards, and also in terms of their regularity.
Okay. Where I'm trying to get to, and I'm really just trying to understand, I'm trying to learn, that the amount of public money that is pumped into this company is colossal in real terms. So there's general interest. Because of that amount of public money, and because a great deal of that money actually is channeled through your department, is there a requirement on your department to sign off on the Translink accounts?
The department doesn't have a role in actually signing off on Translink's accounts.
So basically, you actually don't go through them to say these accounts. Just might be helpful. I would have thought if you went through them and said, no, hang on a second, there's some things maybe not right there.
Well, the department relies on the audit office undertaking that role, and ensuring that the accounts of Translink are to proper standards. The department does take. The department does have regular meetings with Translink in terms of their monitoring against their business plan targets throughout the year. The department also takes reports from Translink in relation to their issues arising from their own internal audit and the workings of their audit committee, and indeed the department actually attends the Translink audit committee on occasions to actually make sure that the department's interests are upheld there in that setting.
Can I interject there, if you don't mind, David? You talk there about them attending. The committee members will be aware of the valuable role that DRD do attending anything to do with Translink. If I can cast the memories back again to the Coleraine to London Dairy Line, where they had an observer who didn't speak. And just one other part I want to correct you on, John. You talked about the public accounts, the Controller and Auditor General. He doesn't look at Translink accounts because they don't come under the public authority. So they are done by an external organisation, not the Controller and Auditor General.
But they are done to
yes, but you did say
professional standards.
Yeah, they did, and and so was Controller Audit General when he qualified your accounts. But you did talk about them whenever you talked about Translink, and they don't do Translink's accounts. Sorry, Dale.
They do look at the Translink accounts before they actually...
For value for money, but not for the full value of the accounts?
Before they actually sign off on our accounts, they do look at the audit opinion, they scrutinise the audit opinion.
Yeah, but they don't scrutinise the total accounts, they look at the opinion.
No.
I'm glad you picked up on that. Because there's such a public interest and a focus on this company, who have actually had their chief executive say that right at this moment of time they are trading as an insolvent business. So you can understand where our anxieties would be. What I'm trying to get my head around is that the amount of money that is channeled through the department to the company, that someone in the department is scrutinising apart from this committee, that money is used what it was meant for. And I would have thought somebody in the department might be able to tell me that they're content and clear that the public money, your money and my money, used, somebody has seen it, looked at it, signed off on it and said, that's good. It would just clear up doubts. But what you're saying to me is that that's not done.
It's not done. It's not done in relation to the detail of the annual accounts of Translink as an organisation. Where it is done is in relation to the performance of Translink, in relation to the business plan targets that are set, agreed by the Minister, by the Department for Translink, which is monitored.
If I asked you, had you any knowledge whatsoever that the money, public money that's been given to this company has been used in a manner not what it was meant for, you would say, well, we don't know because we don't look for that.
But we do look for it in terms of how, in terms of how Translink both take money from the department or apply for money from the department, and we then give grants to Translink. All those processes are subject to audit within the department. The auditors within Translink are appointed by DRD, so we're happy with the standard of the auditors that are actually undertaking that work.
Maybe just finally then.
But in addition,
there are weaknesses identified in the department's performance, and they're recorded in our report. Why have those weaknesses not made it into your accounts report?
These are weaknesses in relation to...
In relation to your department?
In relation to...
the control limits.
Korean to Derry project. This is one, albeit very significant project. I'm not aware if it is referred to in the report of the...
Would you take my word for it that it's not?
No. Well, if I...
You're not going to take my word for it.
I draw your attention to page 51 of the annual report, where the Korean to Derry, Korean to Londonderry railway line upgrade is drawn attention to. And it recognises that there has been a project assessment review undertaken, and that the recommendations contained in that review have been taken forward before procuring the signalling works. And both Translink, or Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company, and the Departmental Accounting Officer are concerned about that.
We can.
So I think it's unfair to say that it hasn't been addressed at all within the annual report. It's clearly addressed in the annual report.
Maybe I don't understand weaknesses in the same way as you do. Sorry, Clerk.
It's not an audit opinion.
Pardon?
It's not an audit opinion.
My advice from is that the reference that I'm referring to is that it's not an audited opinion. You don't
Sorry,
understand.
if you could clarify what is not an audited opinion.
The reference to the power report,
The
weaknesses in it.
The weaknesses in the power report, right, are not contained. You have made reference, from what I understand, you've made reference to something that anybody could identify, right, in what you've just read out to the committee. What I'm saying is that in the power report, they actually have you haven't made any reference to the power report's criticism.
And perhaps, although I can't speak for the...
Well, you can't find it because it's not in there.
I can't speak for the Controller and Auditor General, but had he felt that it was of sufficient significance to warrant mention in his audit certificate or in
You
his
didn't
audit
feel
report.
it was of significance to put it in?
Pardon?
Your department?
No. The report on the certificate of the Controller and Auditor General and his report are not written by the department. They're written by him. It's part of his reporting to the Assembly. And had he felt that there was sufficient weakness to merit inclusion in his certificate and/or his report, he would.
So you're saying he's ignoring. What you're saying is he is ignoring the significance of the power report.
I'm putting it into a context that he being aware of that.
Because he doesn't mention that it nullifies and reduces the significance of the power report.
I'm not at all, because the power report was commissioned by the department. The recommendations have been accepted by the department and have been taken forward. And
the department recognised the weaknesses that have been pointed out by the power report.
And the department recognise and are addressing the weaknesses pointed out in the power report in relation to the Korean to Londonderry.
We're going a long way around, and perhaps it's my fault walking around the clock here on such a simple matter. I really don't feel, Chair, I've had an answer, except perhaps it's the fault of the auditor in terms that he's left it out. As
I say, I can't speak for him and for.
Well, can you speak for the department then, John? Why did you leave it out?
Pardon?
Why did you leave it out?
We didn't leave it out. We've put it in. It's drawn attention to in the annual report.
But it's drawn attention to, but not in the terms
of the
weakness identified by the power report. Well, that's your interpretation. What you're saying is there was a problem. Oh, we're sorry. We've identified it and we're now getting it over. Right? This is a serious criticism, which somebody's left out. And now I'm at a loss as to know, was it not really such a serious criticism? At the time I thought it was a very serious criticism, and in fact I would still do.
And the department recognised the criticisms that the power review threw up and have accepted the recommendations contained in the power review and are taking them.
I don't mean any disrespect, but there's sometimes, John, I think you'd be very good at just giving name, rank and serial number to some of these questions, because they're not really answers at all. But I thank you for what you're trying to do.
Okay, David, is that you?
Thank you.
John, you're next.
Chairperson. John, you're very welcome in case you got a question you're not. Those sins of omission that David have talked about, that's fine. I can understand where there might be some confusion there. But you did claim that you undertook detailed monitoring throughout the year. Now, it so happens that in the project assessment review report, you have in fact been criticised for ineffective scrutiny of IFCO Translink. So there is perhaps a clearer example of not simply leaving something out, but actually putting in a statement that's inaccurate.
Well, again, and I'm not. You know, I didn't come prepared to talk about the power report or, you know, the recommendations in the power report and whatever. The power report was very much looking at one aspect of the relationship between the department and Translink, and was focusing in on one project, albeit a significant project, and it's highlighted legitimate criticisms associated with that project.
John, sorry, just before John asks you another question, just to remind you, you keep saying you're not here for these particular areas. You're here for the annual report and the accounts.
No, I'm here for the annual accounts. I made that clear when I was coming. I was here to talk about the annual report, or the annual accounts, and the qualification in the annual accounts. I made that clear at the outset.
Well, do you want to leave and come back another day?
No, I'm
because
happy,
we're quite happy we can adjourn this.
I'm happy to take.
Because if you're not able to answer the questions of the members, and as John has characterised this,
I'm happy to take questions associated with the annual accounts and the qualifications arising in the annual accounts.
Members, I feel that we're wasting our time and their time. I feel that if John doesn't want to answer the questions, we reconvene this meeting.
To be fair, Chair, I do apologise. I'm not being contrary to the committee. I assumed this was just on the accounts. To be fair, I don't know why. Maybe it was John's initial. There was a question I wanted to ask on the accounts, but I would accept the majority decision.
Yeah. Well, we're hopefully not have to go to vote. I mean, I'm telling what you're saying, but it is about the accounts. But the power review is associated with the accounts. And given that John is actually head or director of finance, I would have thought he would have across that level of detail. I mean, the other thing was just for your benefit, Adrian, and not.
No, I accept that.
The power review, this committee only received it about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's a relatively new document, and you would have thought, John, you being head of finance, would have been across the detail of that. And given that it's cited in the documentation that we have got, there's two members now are particularly interested in areas around that, and you seem unwilling to answer.
Well, it's not so much unwilling as I don't have all the detail with me in relation to that. I suppose another point I would make, and expenditure in relation to the accounts relate particularly, the accounts are a historic document. In effect, they look at expenditure in the year that has just passed, so it's the 2014-15 year. In that year,
just leaving the meeting, I'm not satisfied.
With legislation after this is the only thing.
Well, I am sorry, this man is wasting my time, and my time is very valuable.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a bit unfair.
It's not your opinion, so just shut up.
But the members,
you tell me to shut up.
Members, through the chair, members.
That's very ignorant.
Through the chair, members. Through the chair.
Interfering there like a budget
members. We can carry on with John's evidence till we see where we can get it. But what we can't do here is now we cannot go on to do agenda number 8, which is support legislation.
But Chair, what I was trying to put across is there's some financial issues I wanted to ask John.
Yeah.
I fully accept John and David.
I understand that.
Want to expand upon that. But I'm sorry, that's childish behaviour. I'm sorry, and I think it's very offensive to a senior civil servant.
Yeah, we have the members here. We'll continue to take this where we can. We can revisit this. John's got the floor. If John wants to get back to this line of questioning, if we can't get the answers, we will bring John and Brigitte back. But we have 4 members here now. We can continue, but we can't go on to agenda item number 8. John.
Thanks, Chairperson. John, I've known you for a long time, and I have every respect for you. I want to clarify that. And I'm sorry about the remarks that went across the table there. And, I mean, if you haven't got the information, well, I think we're mature enough to realise that we can maybe get it at a later date. But I want to ask you one question. Qualified accounts are not good. Nobody wants their accounts qualified. But is one of the factors the overspend that you talked about earlier? Was that related to a £20 million that was supposed to come from Belfast Port?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, just to keep the old boat balanced, whose decision was it that the £20 million could be included to avoid an overspend? Was it the current minister? Was it a previous minister?
It was the executive at the setting of the budget in the period 2011 to 2015. There was an amount of £20 million of income assumed that could be gained from the Belfast ports in each of the years 2013-14 and again in 2014-15.
So just for the record, Chairperson, it was the executive who made the decision that the £20 million that allegedly might come from Belfast Port could be included.
Yes.
So that's the reason why the accounts are qualified.
That's the prime. Yes, that is the reason why the accounts are qualified.
But Chairperson, I think that's very useful because you know the last thing we want to do is to target one individual for something that went belly up or whatever. Now,
Just while John's gathering his thoughts on that, I mean, and that is useful. I mean, and I fully accept that. There's no issue with that. John, just for the record, how many years did the executive give additional money because that money wasn't forthcoming?
They gave during the 13-14 year. It was accepted by the budget review group and the executive that money should be returned to the department through the in-year monitoring processes. And the £20 million came in the 13-14 year.
Yeah.
During 14-15, the budget review group again recommended that the income should come to the department, but through the monitoring rounds. The department bid in each of the monitoring rounds, June, October and January, for the £20 million, except no money came in the 14-15 year.
Okay.
Hence, the department was left with a deficit, i.e. £20 million that we don't have. The department endeavoured as best it could to reduce that deficit down by a further £8 million.
Just to correct you, you said no money came. That particular bid didn't come, but other monies came.
Yes. Some monies did come in January.
How much? Yes, how much came in January, and what was it for?
5.2 million came in January.
For?
For road maintenance and for street lighting repairs.
And was not that same month was not concessionary fares as well as additional money? No.
You could be right. I don't know. I
think yeah, John, you're again.
John, I'm not going to labour the point again, but it was useful that you told us that it was an executive decision that the £20 million from Belfast Port could be included. Now, maybe this is pushing it beyond your scope, but am I to assume that the executive got a recommendation from someone that the £20 million could be included?
I assume the executive decided at the outset of the budget period that there was an understanding that £20 million could be extracted from...
Well, maybe it would be useful, if you don't know the answer today, it would be useful to establish where the recommendation that the £20 million would be included came from? And if you do know, please tell us.
It came from the executive.
I know the
At the outset of...
These boys in the ministerial cars who pop up down at Stormont Castle don't make this stuff up on the hoof. They take it from advice they're given. Who advised them that the £20 million for the port was included?
I don't know.
Well, if you don't know, John, if you don't know precisely detail, and rather than confuse the issue, I think it would be useful to clarify that, and I'm sure the members would be happy to receive a paper with you, the historics in relation to £20 million, and then that will clearly and will be on record for answers, rather than second guessing.
What the department then did do was to see if there was a way, having been given that challenge, that target, was to see if there was some mechanism for getting £20 million from the Belfast ports.
Yeah.
But our inquiries on that front drew a blank in that there was no legal...
Yeah, rather than cutting you short, I think maybe it would be useful to get paper around the whole area so as we're clear in all aspects of it. I'm going to park it there 2 minutes, just with rejoined by another member. So we're going to just set this piece of work aside. We're going to go to agenda item number 8 just to allow us to get that done, and we'll come back, John, if you're okay. But it'd be useful if you give us a paper on the genesis of it from start to end, and then there'll be no confusion or no...
Chairperson, that's critical, because the one thing that this committee wants to do is to be fair to everybody, including the current minister.
Yes.
And it's vital that we're told who made the recommendation that £20 million from the port could be included.
And all the complexities from start to end, and there'll be nothing hidden if we can get that. I mean, and I agree with you, John. I mean, I think transparency is important, regardless of who's to blame. It's not about blaming anyone in particular, but the current minister is getting the blame for something he may not necessarily...
Correct.
He could have inherited. I have no issue with that.
Chairperson, I'll go further. I know he is.
Well, I have no issue with that. I mean, I think for transparency, let's get that, and we'll get that on the record. But can I thank Cathal just for briefly coming back to let us go on to agenda item number 8, which is supporting the legislation not subject to assembly procedure. Can I refer members to page 166 of their pack? I ask members to note that the one-way traffic Ballymena Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2015, the Road Races Ulster Rally Order Northern Ireland 2015, the Parking Places on Roads Disabled Persons Vehicles Amendment Number 2 Order Northern Ireland 2015. The committee have been asked to note that the following statutory rule is the responsibility to agree the statutory rules lies with the Committee for Environment, which is the Road Traffic Fixed Penalty Offences Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2015. So our members can note those. Okay. Yeah. So we get back again. Thank you, Cathal, for joining us to do that.
Can I go again?
You can indeed, yeah. So we'll go back to agenda item 7, and John, you were still asking questions.
Just John, you said you're just here to discuss the accounts but not the report.
Well, I have, and Regine has, we have detailed knowledge of what's in the accounts. We have been working on that for months and months.
Yes.
There's a different process. I'm not directly involved in the preparation of the annual report. Comes from all parts of the department, so I'm not familiar with every single word in the annual report.
Well, John, just not sorry for cutting across you, but you are head of finance. I fully appreciate that, and if it's outside your remit, I apologise. But surely somebody must have advised you that because of the interest of this committee and how Nithco Translink function or malfunction, that there surely would have been questions that would have been raised that linked the accounts to the report.
Are you going back to the power report again?
Yes, of course.
I would again reiterate that the annual report and accounts covers a 14-15 year. It covers essentially expenditure that happened in the 14-15 year. Korean to Londonderry actually didn't incur any expenditure in the 14-15 year. It was all part of a was all part of a process that has been subject to delays, and that is now progressing, albeit in the 15-16 year. The Power Report arose in the 14-15 year. Yes, it highlighted problems associated with the procurement on that particular contract, but it's the particular weaknesses associated with that could legitimately be argued to fall outside the 14-15 annual report and accounts.
Just finally, Chairperson, I want to thank John and Regine for coming here. We may not have got all the answers we wanted, but rather than being totally negative about it, as the member who left was, I regard it as work in progress, something that the committee can pick up on, and if it's not John's remit to answer the questions that are unanswered, then somebody will do it. And I think that makes for a good working relationship.
And that's fair enough, John. Just on that, but John, the other John, sorry. There was no money spent. Was there not a procurement process that ended prematurely last year, which would have been in the same year? Would there not costs occurred with that in relation to the Coleraine London Dairy Line? Because from memory, and this is where I think from memory, did it not collapse around June time, which would have been in the same financial year, which instigated the power review? So there must have been money spent somewhere in there in relation to the procurement process, John.
There might have been some, but it would have been small. You know, it certainly wasn't the capital. You know,
yeah, but just for factual accuracy, I mean that's what I'm trying to get out here. There would have been something done in that financial year in relation to Coleraine London Dairy Line, because, and I'm trying to catch it from memory.
There would have been at least some internal Translink spend,
and it was because and the power review came. More for Adrian's benefit, the rest of the members will know, the power review came in the back of the collapse of that process.
That's right. And
which was instigated, I think, from memory in July, was to report by, or was it concluded by July, or concluded by report on September. So it was all very much in the same financial year, and it was about the criticisms of that particular project. So, but I think we'll take John's guidance because he's older and wiser than most of us here sometimes. We'll maybe set that one aside today and come back to that particular area. And sure. Should it be yourself, John, or some of your other colleagues, or Bridget and her colleagues, we can come back to that. Adrian, you'd indicate it as well.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to yourselves. I do apologise what you witnessed. Really, John asked the question that I wanted to ask, and that was, I'm delighted we're going to get a paper on it. And I have to be fair, I didn't want this to stop, Chair, because I thought that was a very important issue that John has really raised about the £20 million Belfast Port, and it seemed crucial. I think you mentioned it at the start, John, to have your accounts qualified. It's possibly the first time it's happened. I don't know. I'm sure with professional competence, it's not something you would want to see happen again. Just as a very general answer, if that £20 million had been given into the budget, would I be right in saying it wouldn't have been qualified?
Absolutely.
Because the efficiency savings were being made.
Yes.
4.4%, I think you identified.
Yes. Yes.
So
the department went beyond the 4.4% and made further savings of another 8 million into to reduce the £20 million overspend down to about 12. So the department went beyond beyond the normal requirement to try and address this overspend.
Very positive, John.
And also, had it not been for the overspend, our accounts wouldn't have been qualified, and all the other aspects of the accounts got not only a clean bill of health, but actually the audit office commented very favourably about the presentation of the accounts, because both they and us are working to very tight timescales in terms of trying to lay the accounts prior to summer recess, and it takes a lot of planning and coordination, and they complimented Regine and her staff in terms of how they presented the accounts to them and how easy they were to audit, etc. And I'm delighted that other than this overspend issue, which has given rise to the the qualification and regularity. There's nothing else that's been drawn to your attention arising from our accounts in 14-15. And I actually think that's a very positive position.
I agree, John, and I thank you and Regine for all the hard work. I just think that important point that John raised, and I'm just curious, we're going to get a paper on that. We're getting some background to that 20 million. When will we go see that, Chair? Will it be?
I presume over the summer, John?
Yes.
Over summer. I think that's key to it. I think that's
The only thing, and I mean, I'm not trying to continue to be negative about that, but you would have been budgeting at the start of the financial year knowing that you were going to be bidding for the £20 million, so you should have been setting your plan. I take what Adrian's saying. If you knew up front you were getting the 20 million, you wouldn't have been 8.8 overspent. However, the adjustment should have come at the start of the year. Yeah. You're going to a monitoring round in the assumption you may get. But let's be honest, John, you're in for a big. Well, I don't know how you've fared in this one, but you're in for a considerable amount of money. I don't think you realistically think you will get everything you bid for at every monitoring round.
No, and I agree with you in that regard. However, going into 14-15, having had the executive support for the
previous year.
In the previous year, I think it was wholly realistic to make that assumption going into 14-15.
And I think, and there lies the issue, probably to assume something's coming, But
well, I thank you for that, Chair. I think it's a very important issue, and I do look forward to seeing that.
But I think the paper will be useful, and I mean, I think we want the history of who introduced that right back. So that may be outside your remit, John, but I'm sure through Alan and the rest of the
I would like to record it. I do apologise for my ignorance, for stupidity, and I'm sure you as a friend will keep me right, and I know with John and the other members, Cahill, etc. But I won't be told to shut up by any member of this committee.
Well, I think it was inappropriate. I think
it's very inappropriate. I'll talk to David privately about it, but I won't be told to shut up. I might ask 101 stupid questions, but maybe the 102nd will be positive and useful.
No,
scrutiny of this committee. I'm learning, but I won't be told to shut up anybody.
Well, I think we're all in the same. I'm only here since September, so I'm still learning and probably learn to leave it.
You'll keep me right, sir.
But I think we need to all moderate the language, that we're not being offensive to each other.
Good to each other.
Sometimes it can get heated in here, and it can be amongst members as well. But hopefully we get there in the end. But I don't think there was any need necessarily for the outburst. But David being David.
Can I maybe address, Regine's just helpfully providing some information for me. One of your earlier questions was in relation to how many times the departmental accounts have been qualified in the last
4 years.
4 years. I don't think they have been qualified, other than perhaps for a regularity type issue, again in relation not in relation to the department themselves, but in relation to Northern Ireland Water, where there were procurement related issues in Northern Ireland Water, which may have crept into the past 4 years. But again, that's a regularity. It's more of a technical thing rather than compliance with accounting standards, etc.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I mean, I look forward to receiving the paper, because I think it will give us all clarity around that. But I do say that, I mean, we're into another year now. Yeah. Just because you got it 2 years ago, I'm sure you haven't entered this year with the assumption you're going to get it. So hopefully we're not talking about a qualification that counts based on a promise that you got 2 years ago, 3 years and 4 years ago.
Well, as you may be aware, in budget 15-16, one of the adjustments that was made in budget 15-16 was to take that out. Was to take that out. Actually, to say, well, there's no way that DRD can get income from Belfast ports. Therefore, let's not build that into the budget.
But given you were depending on that in the monitoring round last year, you really should have been doing the same, I would assume, last year. Because, it wasn't on the table. You were working on an assumption that was coming, John. The way you've done this year, and I mean, you weren't in that position last year, but the way this year has been approached, it's very clear to see from, I think you started off at 344, you took out 300, whatever it was. We're not getting those figures today. I looked at them a while ago, but you took out the £20 million. It was clearly taken out.
It was taken out by DFP. DFP took it out as part of the budget, as part of an opening budget adjustment.
But I think the same should possibly have happened last year. But look,
oh yes, absolutely. No, I agree.
Thank you for today.
That would have resolved the problem had
Yeah,
that
well,
been
you
addressed
would have knew
last
exactly where you were going, and you would have been budgeting. You were going to be short.
Yes.
But you were working on the basis of a wish list. So, but anyway, thanks for today. We look forward to getting that paper as soon as humanly possible. So thank you, Breezy and John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, any other business? Members, just for information, at the start of the meeting today, I don't know members whether they're interested or not. Pamela's joining us, and we're losing Gavin, who's going to the business office. So wish Gavin all the best, certainly in his new role. And then now we welcome Pamela to the committee and the assistance that she's going to give us. So as this is the last meeting, and I know Gavin really wants to get doing that, the meeting's now closed, and Gavin really wants to get pushing this button.